Eastern Jin Dynasty. Introduction to my powerful minister father. Murong Chui. Huan Wen has little talent and relies solely on his son's labor. Huanxi. Those who gave birth to me are my parents, and those who know me are Murong.Huan Wen. Father and son of the Yihuan family. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. In the first year of Yonghe in the Eastern Jin Dynasty, in 345 AD, Yue, the general of the expedition to the west and the governor of Jingzhou, suffered from a back gangrene and was critically ill. The news reached Jiankang, causing shock to the court. Similarly, Huan Wen, who was then the governor of Shuzhou and in charge of the military affairs of Qing, Su, and Yan provinces, was also worried about it. Huan Wen and Yue share the same aspirations and have an unbreakable relationship. They once made an agreement to help the world together. Huan Wen was only concerned about not only Yue's life and death, but also the ownership of the Jingzhou governor. Despite Huan Wen's resounding official title, nowadays the Central Plains is desolate and the land is deep. The so-called Qing, Su, and Yan provinces are only the provinces and counties established by the imperial court in the south after crossing the south in clothing, rather than the traditional three provinces. Shuzhou, where Huan Wen was located, had its capital located at Jinkou on the south bank of the Yangtze River, now Zhenjiang City, Jiangsu Province. At least for now, Jingzhou is the place where heroes come into play. Huan Wensu had great ambitions. Now in his 30s, at the age of 30.4, he wanted to achieve something, but how could he remain indifferent to the position of Jingzhou governor? It is said that everyone has their own selfish desires, and Huan Wen hopes to take over from Yue and defend Jingzhou, showing off his skills. And Yue will definitely not harm his own interests, and he will recommend Huan Wen as his successor with a fair heart. Just as Huan Wen, who was resting at home, was preparing for the rain and making early arrangements, someone knocked on the door of the study. His thoughts were disturbed by the knocking on the door, and Huan Wen frowned and said displeasedly, "Who is outside?" "Father, it's me." A slightly immature answer sounded outside the door. Huan Wen saw that it was his eldest son Huanxi, and his eyebrows relaxed as he said, "Why don't you rest well in the house and come in after recovering from a serious illness?" As the door was pushed open, a 14-year-old boy entered the study. He was handsome, but his face was very pale, indicating that he had suffered a serious illness. The young man was the legitimate eldest son of Huan Wen and Princess Nankang, Huanxi. The child pays respects to their father. Huanxi respectfully bowed to Huan Wen, who nodded and asked, "Why did you come to find me instead of recuperating in the room?" Huanxi stood up and replied. Upon hearing of the upheaval in Jingzhou, the child requested his father's permission to visit Jiankang. Upon hearing this, Huan Wen raised his eyebrows and asked knowingly, "Jingzhou undergoes changes, what are you doing in Jiankang?" Huanxi's innocent and tender face became solemn. "Seeking to leave Jingzhou for my father." Huan Wen was furious. "Yugong is a close friend of his father who once showed kindness to me. Now that his life and death are uncertain, you are encouraging me to seize his inheritance." Seeing Huan Wen's uncontrollable anger, Huanxi was not panicked. He remained calm and said, "Jingzhou is the capital of the imperial court. When did it become the property of the Yu family again? The child knows that his father has the ambition to restore the Central Plains. How can his father disregard the national righteousness due to his personal friendship with Duke Yu?" Huan Wen put away his angry expression and asked, "Who taught you this kind of rhetoric? Knowing a son is like a father. His own son weighs a few pounds, how could he, as a father, not know? With Huanxi's qualifications, it is impossible to say these truths." Huanxi breathed a sigh of relief in his heart, but his face remained unchanged. The words from the heart need not be taught by others. "Are you serious about this?" "I dare not deceive my father." Huan Wen temporarily put aside his doubts and continued to ask. "If you go to Jiankang, how should you proceed? Huanxi had already prepared a draft, and he calmly said. Children should pay homage to Yihuan with the courtesy of their nephews and grandchildren, and explain their interests for him, promoting his support for his father's departure from Jingzhou. What Huanxi said about Yihuan was exactly Yichong, who was in charge of recording and serving as a clerk, attendant, and general affairs in the current dynasty. Huan Wen nodded slightly and said during the examination. Why do you firmly believe that Yihuan will definitely support being a father? Huanxi spoke confidently. How could Yihuan let the Yu family continue to lead Jingzhou, as they had a falling out over the matter of deciding a policy? Moreover, Jing and Chu are important towns of the country. Lu Kang once said, if we survive, Wu will survive, if we perish, Wu will perish. This can be said to be related to the security of the country and should be guarded by capable people. There is a public opinion on the talent of my father, who can take over from Dukyu, guard the western domain, and abandon my father. Who can bear this heavy responsibility? Nowadays, Yihuan assists his young master, but none of the feudal lords from different regions provide him with external assistance. If it weren't for his father's current presence in Jinko, he couldn't have entered the court without an edict. Otherwise, if his father could personally come to the door, Yihuan would have to step down and greet him. The enmity between Yichong and the Yu family was deep. As early as when Emperor Cheng of Jin was seriously ill, the conflict had already erupted. Yichong advocated for the establishment of a crown prince, while Yu Bing and Yu Yi, who were external relatives, persuaded Emperor Cheng of Jin to establish a Changjun on the grounds that the crown prince was young and the country was in doubt, and recommended his younger brother Sima Yu as Emperor Kong of Jin. Last year, Emperor Kong of Jin was critically ill, and the Yu brothers wanted to interfere with the central government. They established Emperor Kang's uncle, King Kuaiji Sima Yu. But with the support of Yichong, Emperor Kong of Jin passed on the throne to the 2-year-old crown prince Sima Dan. Sima Dan succeeded the throne and was regent by Empress Dowager Chu Xuanzi, who appointed the State Affairs Commission to Yichong. Having experienced 2 confrontations over the establishment of the emperor, the relationship between Yichong and the Yu family can be imagined. And the relationship between Huan Wen and Yu Yi is also well known. If he cannot obtain the support of Yichong, he will never be able to leave Jingzhou. Huan Wen listened to Huanxi's analysis and was overjoyed. What he cared about was not hearing this truth. After all, with Huan Wen's intelligence, there is no need for Huanxi to give advice. He was pleased that these truths were spoken from his eldest son. However, Huan Wen was not overjoyed. He made an excuse to reconsider and asked Huanxi to return to his room for rest. After Huanxi withdrew, Huan Wen immediately summoned his confidant to investigate who Huanxi had come into contact with today. The news from Jingzhou came from Jinko today. If someone really was behind the scenes to guide Huanxi, it could only be the reasoning he had spoken to him today. Shortly thereafter, a confidant returned to report that prior to this, Huanxi had been recuperating in his room. When Princess Nankang went to visit, Huanxi heard the news that Yu Yi was critically ill after Princess Chang left. She hurriedly came to the study, during which no one taught him how to speak. Perhaps it was because of misfortune that my son was blessed, otherwise where would such knowledge come from? Huan Wen pondered to himself. He is not sure about the reason behind it, but he also knows that it is a happy event. Since ancient times, there have been examples of people who have made a big splash without showing off their beauty. Speaking of Huanxi, he left Huan Wen's study and went straight back to his own bedroom. As early as when he was sick, Huanxi had already digested the information left by the original owner. He is the legitimate eldest son of the future Eastern Jin Dynasty powerful minister Huan Wen, and also a traveler from the 21st century. As the saying goes, it is better to be a Taiping dog than a person in troubled times. At least heaven treats him well, and he was born into a family of powerful people. However, as the legitimate eldest son, Huanxi clearly remembered that his uncle Huan Chong was in charge of the Huan Wen tribe, while the one who inherited the title was the unborn Huan Xian. If it weren't for the extreme disappointment in the talents of his legitimate sons, how could Huan Wen, on the brink of death, abandon the long and young, abandon the legitimate and establish the illegitimate, and choose the then 5-year-old illegitimate son Huanxi? Huanxi did not want to spend his life aimlessly. He urgently hoped to change Huan Wen's view of himself and also participate in military and state affairs through this. In the patient waiting of Huanxi, soon someone came to deliver a message that Huan Wen wanted to see him. Returning to his father's study again, there was a young man inside. Judging by his appearance and height, he was a few years older than Huanxi. It was his fifth uncle, Huan Chong, who was 18 years old at the time. Upon seeing Huanxi enter the door, Huan Wen waited for him to bow before saying, "Shier, when it comes to Jiankong, you and your young son should not make decisions on your own. You should discuss everything with your fifth uncle and obey his orders. Go to the book garden www.jiaoshuiyuan.com. Young son is the courtesy name of Huan Chong, and Huan Wen is the eldest son in the family. Among the 5 brothers, only Huan Chong is highly valued by Huan Wen. Making friends with Yichong is of great significance. Even if Huanxi speaks eloquently, Huan Wen is not confident in letting him go alone. Although Huan Chong was young, he was capable in handling things. Even if Huanxi didn't get involved, Huan Wen would still send Huan Chong to Jiankong. Huan Wen asked Huanxi to go with him, but it was mainly due to his willingness to take the initiative, as well as his generous and eloquent remarks. The child obeys his father's orders. Huanxi first bowed to Huan Wen and then bowed to Huan Chong, saying, "Thank you for your uncle's care on this trip." Huan Chong smiled and said, "As Shier said, my elder brother has told me that after 3 days of farewell, we should treat each other with respect, and the ancients sincerely did not deceive me." Huanxi and Huan Chong claimed to be uncles and nephews, but in fact, they were only 4 years apart. When Huan Chong was born, he was in the midst of the Su Jun rebellion. His father Huan Yi raised his army to fight against the bandits, but was killed by the traitor Han Huang because his subordinate Jiang Bo defected to the enemy. Huan Wen was 16 years old at the time, and his family was in decline. His mother gave birth to Huan Chong, who was weak in health. At that time, the family was poor, and Huan Wen had to hold Huan Chong, who had just been born and was still in his infancy, as collateral to exchange sheep with others for his mother's health. The owner of the sheep refused to use Huan Chong as collateral, and because there were no children at home, he was willing to take care of Huan Chong on his behalf and gave the sheep as a gift to Huan Wen. When Huan Chong was young, he was fostered in the home of a sheep owner. Until 3 years later, Huan Wen broke into the funeral of his enemy Jiang Bo alone, killed his descendants, and became famous. He was also selected by Emperor Ming of Jin as his son-in-law and married Princess Nan Kong at that time. After his official career, he finally found Huan Chong and took him home. Huanxi and Huan Chong were only 4 years apart, which meant that their children would often be together and their relationship would be deep. 2 fools are like a dolphin dog. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Huanxi and Huan Chong each returned to their rooms to tidy up their belongings. Upon hearing the news, Huanxi's mother, Princess Sima Xingnan of Nankang, rushed over. Shier has just recovered from a serious illness, and it's time for her to rest and recover, old slave. What's so remarkable about you? You must let him run for you. Sima Xingnan was furious and questioned. She is not a good-tempered woman. As the eldest daughter of Emperor Ming of Jin, she has been spoiled since childhood and her temper is not ordinary arrogance. After more than 10 years of marriage, Huan Wen still dares not take a concubine. In the original time and space, after pacifying the Shu region, Huan Wen was full of energy and took the daughter of Li Shi, the ruler of Chenghan, as his concubine, hiding her in the back room of his study. Upon hearing the news, Sima Xingnan was filled with jealousy and brought dozens of maids to wield swords, intending to kill. If it weren't for the pitiful appearance of the Li family, he would have turned into a dead soul under the sword. Huan Wen exuded a heroic courage in front of outsiders, and when he saw his wife, he dared not be bold. He smiled and explained. Not being forced by me, it's really Shier's earnest plea. He volunteered to share his father's worries, but how could I refuse his heartfelt offer? Sima Xingnan was skeptical, but upon careful consideration, Huan Wen did not need to deceive himself. She snorted. I'm sorry you dare not deceive me. After speaking, he left and went straight to find Huanxi, leaving only Huan Wen's persistent lament that there were fierce women in the family and they couldn't be peaceful. When Sima Xingnan arrived at Huanxi's residence, Huanxi had already packed his bags. Mother, why did you come? I was about to say goodbye to you. Huanxi scratched his head and smiled. Sima Xing's male bite glanced at him. If I don't come to find you, I'm afraid you'll slip away quietly. In Huan Wen's eyes, Sima Xingnan was a shrew and jealous woman, but in front of his son, he was a kind mother. If it weren't for her indulgence, how could the legitimate sons of Huan Wen be spoiled and unable to thrive? Huanxi was exposed by Sima Xingnan about his worries and had to explain. My father has the ambition to support the imperial family and restore the Central Plains. He must have a place for military use in order to make a difference. Now that Duke Yu is critically ill and Jingzhou has no owner, only his father can guard the western border for the country and ensure peace on the left side of the river. I went to court to serve my father, not only as filial piety to my son, but also as loyalty to my ministers. Sima Xingnan was dissatisfied and said. You all use loyalty and filial piety to suppress me, how can I still stop you? Huanxi stepped forward and hugged his mother's arm, pleasing her with a smile. The child only dares to speak freely with the help of their mother's love. I kindly request her permission and understanding of the child's childlike heart. Sima Xingnan couldn't resist his eldest son's plea and said helplessly. Well, Jinko and Jiankong are not far away. You can go if you want, but the cold has just healed, so you must take care of your body. Huanxi was overjoyed, and after bidding farewell to Sima Xingnan, he bid farewell to Huan Wen in the study. Before leaving, Huan Wen said solemnly. When you come to Beijing this time and run around for me, you should take the characters as your title. Speaking, Huan Wen took out a piece of white paper with the words, Bo Dao, prominently written on it. Uncle Buzhong, in order for Huanxi's younger brothers to reach adulthood, would like to write the characters Zhong Dao, Shu Dao, and Ji Dao. Huanxi knelt down and received the two characters, Bo Dao. Xie Dao. Children, thank your father for giving them words. You must remember your father's teachings and not forget them. Huan Wen nodded and said. Let's go. Huanxi once again worshipped Huan Wen and Sima Xingnan. In the reluctant eyes of his mother and younger siblings, he and his uncle Huan Chong boarded the carriage heading to Jiankong. Jinko is located 160 miles east of Jiankong, not far away. With the help of a fast horse, it can be reached in less than half a day. This is also why Huan Wen was able to receive news so quickly. However, Huanxi was not good at riding and could only ride with Huan Chong. The two of them rushed to Jiankong in a hurry, and the coachman repeatedly whipped and the carriage jolted, forcing Huan Chong to sweat for the weak Huanxi. Huan Chong stabilized Huanxi and comforted him, saying. In fact, there is no need for such a rush. It is unlikely that the court will reach a conclusion on the ownership of the Jingzhou governor so quickly. Huan Chong stabilized Huanxi and comforted him. Huanxi shook his head and said. My nephew understands what my uncle said, but unfortunately, the court is divided and afraid of branching out. Huan Chong saw him persist and stopped persuading him. After a bumpy journey, the two of them set off early in the morning and finally arrived at the capital of Eastern Jin, Jiankong, in the afternoon. Jiankong was the capital of the Eastern Wu and Eastern Jin dynasties, with Qinhuai River to the south, Hohu Lake to the north, and the Yangtze River to the west. It was a place of great strength and was well guarded. The carriage drove into Jiankong, with prosperous scenes on both sides. However, Huanxi had already experienced the prosperity of this city in the original owner's memory, which was not surprising. After all, no matter what, when it comes to prosperity, it cannot compare to commercial streets in later generations. Most of the nobles in the city lived in two areas. One was the Qingxi River in the north of the city, and the other was along the Qinhuai River in the south of the city. Among them, the Qingxi River in the north of the city is mainly composed of local aristocrats from Jiangnan, while the northern aristocrats who cross south are distributed in the alleys near the Qinhuai River, such as the Wui Lane where Wang and Xia live, which is located on the north bank of the Qinhuai River. Qingxi, also known as Dongxiu, connects the tidal ditch in the north of the city to discharge the water of Xuanwu Lake, and flows south into the Qinhuai River. He Chong came from the He family in Lujiang and lived in Qingxi for a long time. Huanxi and Huan Chong went on this trip to pay their respects to this assistant minister. The two of them arrived at Hefu. It was still early, and He Chong was on duty in Taichung. Huan Chong handed over the memorial, and after the steward explained, he proposed. The two gentlemen have come from afar, why not find a place to rest first? When my master returns to the mansion, I will convey it to you. Huan Chong originally wanted to agree, but felt Huanxi pull his sleeve and look down. Huanxi pointed at him, and Huan Chong understood. He changed his tone and said. It's okay, we'll wait outside the mansion for He Xiang. After the steward left, Huan Chong hesitated and said. It's still early at this time, why don't we find a tavern to rest and make plans when He Xiang returns to his mansion? Huanxi lowered his voice and explained. If my uncle is what he looks like, would he feel the sincerity of the guests who have been waiting outside the mansion for a long time and are unwilling to leave? Huan Chong was speechless, and after a while, he sighed and said. I don't know what you've experienced during your illness and how you've become so intelligent. Huanxi proudly said. Tiger father has no sons of dogs. Father is a hero of the time, and my qualifications are far inferior. It's just that the pearl was shrouded in dust and my sharpness was not revealed. Huan Chong also smiled and said. As Shi'er said. The carriage of He Fu drove through the noisy streets, and the central library supervisor He Chongduan sat in the carriage, closing his eyes to rest his mind. However, his brain kept running, and what he was worried about was who should leave Jingzhou. Yu Yi was critically ill and his time was running out. He had already sent a memorial from Jingzhou, hoping to be succeeded by his second son Yihuan. But for both public and private purposes, this is unacceptable to He Chong. Not to mention the enmity between the two families, Jingzhou is the western gateway of the country. How can we guard it with a young man with a white face who is still wet and wet? Previously, Yu Liang and Yu Yi passed away as brothers in Jingzhou. Now, He Chong never allows their father to die and their son to inherit. The Yu family has been operating in Jingzhou for many years, but how could they be willing to give up their power? A slight mistake could lead to another rebellion. He Chong understood that in order to reject Yu Yi's request, he needed to find a candidate who could persuade the audience. Not only were the courtiers unable to criticize, but they were also able to intimidate the Yu clan, so that they dared not rebel and could only surrender Jingzhou. He Chong's subordinates couldn't find such a person. Just as He Chong was troubled by this, the carriage slowed down and his confidant reported through the car curtain. Master, there are two young masters waiting outside the mansion. He Chong let out a sigh, and when the carriage stopped, he lifted the driving curtain and walked out. He Chong didn't know the guests. After all, he is not on good terms with Huan Wen, how could he recognize the children of Huan Wen's family? But there was a certain resemblance between the boy and Princess Chang of Nankang, which made him feel familiar. Fortunately, the steward who had received the uncle and nephew of the Huan family had been waiting by the roadside early on. He helped He Chong down and respectfully handed over a memorial, reminding him. Among the two, the older one claimed to be the younger brother of Duke Huan, the governor of Shuzhou, while the younger one was the son of Duke Huan. They had been waiting for their master for a long time. The old slave asked them to find a place to rest, but they refused to leave. They asked them to wait in the mansion and refused to move. Jiuxing suddenly realized, and his originally slightly cloudy eyes suddenly came to his senses. When you fall asleep, someone will give you a pillow. If there is anyone else in the world who can replace Yue, leave Jingzhou, and make the Yu family dare not compete, only Huan Wen, who has always been admired by Yue, is the one. Now, at a time when the ownership of Jingzhou is uncertain, Huan Wen sent his son and younger brother to pay his respects. How could Jiuxing not guess the purpose of their trip? Before Jiuxing could move, the uncle and nephew of the Huan family had already voluntarily leaned over. Young man Huanchong, on behalf of my elder brother, came to pay his respects to Jiuxing. Huanchong bowed and said, while Huanxi also reported to his family and bowed to Jiuxing. Jiuxing nodded slightly and smiled, saying, "You don't need to be polite, both of you. Huan Shuzhou is a minister of the country who has defended the border and made great contributions. Today, he specially invited you to come and visit me. I am overjoyed. Please come with me to the mansion, and I will have my own wine and meat to entertain you." The uncle and nephew of the Huan family quickly thanked him and followed Jiuxing into the mansion door. Jiuxing had no children and only one daughter. He had already married, so only his nephew Yifang and his disciples were present at this banquet. Huan Wen needs the support of Jiuxing, and Jiuxing also needs Huan Wen to replace Yue and end the Yu family's rule in Jingzhou. The two can be described as running in both directions. Therefore, at the banquet, Jiuxing and the uncle and nephew of the Huan family can be said to be both hosts and guests. After 3 rounds of drinking, Jiuxing took his uncle and nephew to the study and asked about their intentions. Huanchong said, "On the order of my elder brother, I came to ask Jiuxing for help in stabilizing Jingzhou." Jiuxing said with a solemn expression, "The attribution of the position of Jingzhou governor should be decided through public consultation, and should not be privately granted or accepted." Upon hearing this, Huanchong couldn't help but look at Huanxi and said solemnly, "If this matter is subject to public consultation, I'm afraid Jingzhou will be replaced by the Yu family's hereditary power from now on." Jiuxing's face changed and he asked after him, "What does this mean?" All of Jiuxing's expressions fell into Huanchong's eyes, and his heart was at ease. Huanchong became even more composed. Prior to the Su Jun rebellion, all the ministers in the court were harmed by it. With the reduction of their fiefdoms and the instigation of the Yu family's rebellion, it is believed that they requested peace of mind. The call for approval from Duke Yu still gained the upper hand. Jiuxing curiously said, "Since you also know that most courtiers support the Yu family's continued defense of Jingzhou, why do you still come to beg me?" Huanchong said solemnly, "Because Jiuxing is different from ordinary people. He is a trusted minister who considers not the gains and losses of each family, but the safety of the country. Jingzhou is a strong vassal state. If we continue to rely on the Yu clan to defend it, we should seek advice from the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Our weak officials are strong, and our country will not be governed." Chao Shi usurped the Han Dynasty and Sima replaced Wei. Little did he know that Yu Shi would not use the troops of Jingzhou to march down the river and inquire about the weight of the Jin Ding. Therefore, my elder brother told me that Jiuxing would definitely lend a helping hand to help him leave Jingzhou, and my brother will also not forget Jiuxing's kindness. He is willing to guard the western border of the country and cut off the Yu family's wings. Jiuxing suddenly realized that these words were all taught by Huan Wen, and he sighed. Yue once spoke to the previous emperor, praising the heroic talents of Huan Shuzhou, which should not be encountered by ordinary people. As a regular son.in.law, he should be entrusted with the task of summoning Fang, and he must have the honor of promoting prosperity and overcoming difficulties. Today I heard you retell Huan Shuzhou's lofty discourse, and I realized that what Yue said was true. The matter was quickly settled, and Jiuxing fully supported Huan Wen as the governor of Jingzhou, while Huan Wen served as Yichang's foreign aide, guarding the western border and helping him. After discussing the big matter, Yichang noticed Huanxi, who remained silent all along. He came with interest and set questions to take the exam. However, Huanxi appeared extremely clumsy, and his answers were unsatisfactory. After the uncle and nephew left, Yichang shook his head with his confidant and said, Huan Huan Wen character Yuanzi, is a prodigy of the time, and his son is like a dolphin dog's ear. The confidant smiled and said, the Huan family has no foundation in Jingzhou and is not a high-ranking family. What they rely on is nothing more than the personal intelligence of Huan Yuanzi. Now his son is extremely dull, and his younger brother can only learn to speak. Congratulations to Jiuxing, who can rest comfortably without worrying about becoming another Yu family in the future. The power of the Yu family today is not only due to being the mother clan of Emperor Cheng and Emperor Kong, but also closely related to the talents of Yu Liang, Yu Bing, Yu Yi, and others. Yichang waved his hand, but it was evident that he was in a good mood. However, Yichang did not know that what Huan Chong said was not just learning from Huan Wen, but being taught by the foolish dolphin dog. 3. Quietly waiting for good news. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Huan Chong was not a fool, and he knew that Huanxi could not really be as foolish as he appeared in front of Yichang. Inside the carriage, Huan Chong asked Huanxi. Today's events may become known to outsiders in the future, so don't you worry about being ridiculed. Huanxi didn't mind and said. Can the ridicule of others hurt me even a little? With just my father leaving Jingzhou, such as a dragon entering the sea, he will surely achieve something. At that time, it will also be the time for me to stand out. If I don't make a name for myself, I will be amazed and the world will look down on me. Huan Chong sighed and said. With your father and son, why worry about our Huan family not being able to prosper? Huanxi smiled and said. In the future, we cannot do without our uncle's efforts. Don't sit back and enjoy the benefits. Huan Chong laughed heartily at the words. At this time, it was already late and the uncle and nephew of the Huan family had moved into the Princess Cheng's mansion in Nanking. It was a mansion bestowed upon them by Emperor Ming of Jin when Sima Xingnan got married. Although the Huan Wen family moved to Jinko, there were still maids in Jiankang's mansion to take care of them. The uncle and nephew stayed overnight, and the next day, Huan Chong went back to Jinko alone to report the news, while Huanxi stayed in Jiankang City. According to his words, an appointment will soon be sent to Jinko. My father will come to Jiankang sooner or later. As I have just recovered from a serious illness and my body is weak, I will no longer have to go through this bumpy journey. Instead, I will stay in Jiankang and wait for them. Huan Chong pondered that Huanxi's words were indeed reasonable, and there were many servants and maids in the mansion. There was no need to worry about Huanxi's lack of care, so he bid him farewell in the early morning and quickly returned to the capital with a few domestic slaves. After Huanxi left, he refused to sit idle at home and led a few servants out for a leisurely stroll. Little Lang, where are we going now? I went to Qingxi yesterday, but today I should be heading to Qinhuai. Huanxi smiled and said. The Qinhuai River runs from east to west across the southern city of Jiankang. Shangganli on the south bank is the busiest area in Jiankang, as well as a commercial area and a distribution center for goods. To travel to Jiankang, Shangganli is a must-visit place. Huanxi was immersed in the hustle and bustle, leaving Wushu without the need to maintain a calm image. Everything he saw seemed fresh. After wandering for a long time, Huanxi finally couldn't help but ask the slightly older servant in a low voice. Can there be a land of wind and moon on both sides of the Qinhuai River? This scared the accompanying servants to death. Little Lang, don't make things difficult for us. If the eldest princess finds out about this, she will have to scratch our skin and cramp us. I beg for your understanding and leave us waiting for a way out. After everyone begged for mercy, Huanxi comforted and said. My sleeves are empty. I don't have the money to have fun, I just want to catch some fireworks when I pass by. Simply put, it's curious about what the so-called brothel looks like. Everyone was shocked, and suddenly a round of applause came from behind. This young gentleman is actually a wonderful person. Huanxi followed the sound and saw a young man slightly older than him. The young man approached and introduced himself, saying, "I am Zhang Xian from Xiachen County." The young man is dressed in luxurious clothes and I don't think he is from an ordinary family. I dare to ask which family the young man is from. It turned out to be the young master of the Zhang family, in the lower dragon Kong Huanchong. As he spoke, Huanxi ignored the surprised gazes of the servants and stepped forward to greet Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian said curiously, "I don't know what the relationship between Duke Huan of Shuzhou and little Langjun is." Huanxi smiled and said, "It's my brother." Zhang Xian suddenly realized that no wonder those servants had said before that they were afraid of being punished by Princess Chang. Huan Chang's sister-in-law was not Princess Chang of Nankang. I used to be the younger brother of Huan Shuzhou. I have admired Duke Huan of Shuzhou for a long time. Today, I am fortunate enough to meet Huanlang. If you don't give up, why not travel with me? Zhang Xian invited him. The Longkong Huan family was not a noble family, and even once became a criminal family. Huan Wen's great-grandfather was Huan Fan, the Grand Minister of Chao Wei, who was killed by the Sima clan after violating the alliance with the Luo River. It was Huan Yi, the father of Huan Wen, who, after crossing the south in clothes and clothing, rubbed against the heat and formed a CP, earning the title of Jiangzhua Bada. It was only then that their lineage was able to recover. However, Zhang Xuanji was willing to make friends with Huanxi because of Huan Wen's great reputation. Huan Wen has not made many achievements now, but his reputation is well known and can be said to be as piercing as thunder. This cannot be separated from his youthful pleasure and enmity, as well as the admiration that Yi has always had for him. Huanxi agreed. "As I wish, I dare not hear." The two of them traveled to Jiankong together, but did not actually go to the Fengyue place. They talked along the way and got along quite well. They learned that Zhang Xian was very skilled in chess, which made Huanxi's heart itch. Before crossing the river, he was a Go enthusiast and immediately proposed to play a game with Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian readily accepted, and Huanxi instructed the servant to buy a chessboard and pieces. Zhang Xian smiled and said, "Why bother so much? My home is in the nearby Wui Lane. If Huanlang is willing, he can play chess with me in the mansion." Zhang Xian comes from the Zhang family in Qin County and lives next to the Xie family in the same county after crossing south. How could Huanxi refuse? He was also thinking of going to Wui Lane to take a look. Wild grass and flowers by the Vermilion Bird Bridge, and the sunset at the entrance of Wui Alley. In the past, the yen in front of the Huanxi Hall flew into the homes of ordinary people. Of course, nowadays sparrows still nest in front of Huanxi Hall. Wui Lane is not particularly unusual, it is just the Huanxi family living here, and its name has been passed down in later generations. It is like a mountain not high, a fairy named, a water not deep, and a dragon spirit. Huanxi was slightly disappointed. As he passed by the residence of the Xie family in Qin County, he glanced at the high wall and didn't know how old Xie Daoyun was now. Upon arriving at Zhang's mansion, which was also a high-walled courtyard, I followed Zhang Xian through the door and headed straight towards his courtyard. A young girl was already waiting in the courtyard. "Brother A has returned. Oh, this distinguished guest looks very unfamiliar. I wonder which young master he is from." The girl and Huanxi are of similar age and have a cute appearance. Zhang Xian led Huanxi into the door and introduced him. "This is the younger brother of Duke Huan of Shuzhou. Under Huan Chong, Huan Yuzi." Huanxi saluted, but the girl's face was very strange, but she still bowed. The young woman Zhang Tongyun turned out to be the young master of the Huan family, who was lost and welcomed from afar. Nowadays, women are not those who have been poisoned by Chengdu Neo-Confucianism, and there is no such thing as avoiding suspicion or not being able to meet outsiders. More than 30 years ago, Wei Jie traveled from Yuzhong to Chengdu. Due to her beauty, women from all over the city gathered around her and offered him papayas as a sign of love. This passionate battle scared Wei Jie out of illness and soon passed away, which was also the origin of the killing of Wei Jie. After exchanging pleasantries, a servant had already brought Go. Zhang Xian led Huanxi to the pavilion to play. Although Zhang Tongyun was not very old, she had both skills in playing the piano, chess, calligraphy, and painting. She was a renowned talented woman from afar, on par with Xie Daoyun from the neighboring Xie family. I heard that the two of them were playing chess, so I followed them to watch the game. In the golden autumn of August, the climate is pleasant, but Zhang Xian in the pavilion is sweating profusely. He has been passionate about playing chess since childhood and enjoys a great reputation. When it comes to his chess skills, even Xian, who is quite his senior, has had to retreat. However, today he meets his opponent. I didn't expect that at such a young age, Huan Chang's chess skills were so amazing that he couldn't resist them at all. Zhang Xian's heart was pounding with fear, but Huanxi only found it dull and tasteless. No matter how strong Zhang Xian's chess skills are, they are only relative to people of this era. However, as a Go enthusiast in later generations, witnessing so many chess manuals, how can Zhang Xian compare them? After another round, the sun tilted westward. Although Huanxi did not fully enjoy himself, he still asked Zhang Xian to resign. Zhang Xian saw that it was not early and did not force him to stay. He sent Huanxi out of Zhang's mansion and returned to the pavilion with his sister Zhang Tongyun, sighing. This young Huan has such chess skills at a young age and will definitely become a national player in the future. Zhang Tongyun couldn't help but laugh and said. Brother really thought he was Huan Yuzi. Zhang Xian was puzzled. What does this mean, little sister? Zhang Tongyun helplessly reminded. Brother A, upon careful consideration, in which year did Duke Huan Jian die to serve his country? During the reign of Huan Yi, the father of Huan Wen, he was posthumously named Jian by the imperial court, hence the name Huan Jian Gong. After being awakened by Zhang Tongyun, Zhang Xian finally came to his senses. Huan Yi died 18 years ago, and that Huan Chong had a youthful appearance, not at the age of 18. This one is quite interesting. Zhang Xian didn't think it was unfair, shook his head and smiled, then sat back in the futon, focusing on the review of the previous round. Zhang Tongyun knew that his elder brother was a chess enthusiast and didn't bother him anymore. He only became a little curious about the identity of the young man just now. As Huanxi left Zhang's mansion, a servant waiting outside greeted him. Little Lang Jun, good news. Great news. On your recommendation, the head of the family is about to leave Jingzhou. The imperial envoy has already gone to Jinko to announce the decree. In the early morning, when Huanxi traveled around Jiankong City, he searched for the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com and engaged in a verbal battle with his courtiers in the court. He finally convinced the Empress Dowager to replace Yue with Huan Wen as the general of Anxi and governor of Jingzhou. He commanded the military forces of Jing, Si, Yong, Yi, Liang, and Ning, and led the southern barbarian colonel. Compared to the excitement of the servant, Huanxi didn't have much surprise. The discussion was held today, but the selection was already made after he and Huan Chong visited Heechong yesterday. In the Kuaiji prince's mansion, Lu Qing, the magistrate of Danyang, angrily said. Huan Wen indeed has extraordinary talents, but this person is ambitious. It is beyond the control of Hexiang. Now that Hexiang has taken Huan Wen out of Jingzhou, he is afraid that the situation will be difficult to control. His harm is far greater than that of the Yu brothers. Speaking, he advised King Kuaiji Sima Yu to say. Please allow the king to lead Jingzhou on his own, so as to preserve the Sheiji ancestral temple. But Sima Yu refused to leave the court and went out of town. Seeing that Sima Yu did not listen to advice, Lu Qing hurriedly said, "If the king doesn't go, please advise the officials to go outside the town." Sima Yu still shook his head and said, "Lu Gong's departure may not be able to shake the Yu family. As the saying goes, only Huan Wen can force the Yu family to delegate power." Seeing Lu Qing extremely angry, Sima Yu then mentioned a joke he heard this morning. "Lu Gong knows Huanxi, the son of Huan Wen. I heard that this person is extremely foolish, why compare him to a dolphin dog?" Last night, Yihuan and his confidants commented on Huanxi, which was widely known. As for Huan Wen sending his son and brother to pay homage to Yihuan, it is not a secret. Otherwise, how could Yihuan change his ambiguous attitude and strongly support Huan Wen? The courtiers were not surprised by this, but instead talked about the Hu father and son of the Huan family, whose father was a hero in the world but his son was a dolphin. When Huan Wen came to Jiankang, he naturally heard of this saying. For introductions to confidants. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Princess Chang's mansion in Nankang. Huan Wen, who had received a favor from Taicheng, returned to the mansion and summoned Huanxi to his side, saying with a moved expression, "I have wronged you for bearing this bad reputation." Huan Chong had returned to Jinko before and did not conceal anything. He reported Huanxi's actions to Huan Wen one by one, which greatly moved Huan Wen. Huanxi shook his head and said, "I have a close relationship with my father. As long as my father agrees, it doesn't matter if the child suffers some injustice." Speaking in confusion, Huanxi said, "I don't know where my mother went, but why didn't she return to the mansion with my father? She stayed in Taicheng to search for any trouble." Huan Wen explained that after speaking, the father and son smiled at each other. Taicheng, Shangshu Tai. In the Han Dynasty, the Shangshu Tai was under the jurisdiction of the Shaofu. Since the Three Kingdoms period, it has gradually become the hub of national government affairs. When Cao Cao came to power, Sun Yu held the position of Shangshu Ling and held a central position. Yihuan, who was responsible for recording Shangshu affairs, usually worked in Taichung, Shangshu. However, this general in charge of the affairs of the commoners and the actual prime minister of the Eastern Jin Dynasty encountered some troubles today. Sima Xingnan angrily arrived at the Shangshu platform, pointing at Yihuan with one finger and cursing with the other across his waist. "Old slave! How dare and bully my shear!" Yihuan knew he was wrong and dared not speak back. How could he have expected that he was just a joke with his confidants, and it was so quickly spread to people? Just as Yihuan was spitting on himself, Huanxi heard the news and hurriedly came to persuade peace. Sima Xingnan's anger was hard to dispel. "Empress Dowager, you come to judge. This old slave said that my shear is a porpoise, shear is my birth, he is a porpoise, and what am I? What are my father, emperor, and mother who gave birth to me? What are the two late emperors who share the same father and mother as me? This old slave is obviously talking about my shear, but in reality, he is insulting the late emperor. He really deserves to be killed." Yihuan's eyes turned black upon hearing this. He knew that the princess of Nankang had been unruly and capricious since she was young, but he didn't know that she had been married for more than 10 years and had raised several children, yet she still couldn't change her hot temper. Fortunately, Huanxi would not really blame Yihuan for disrespecting the late emperor because of Sima Xingnan's words. She kindly persuaded Sima Xingnan, and for the sake of the Empress Dowager's face, Sima Xingnan fiercely said to Yihuan, "In old age, if you don't know my family's Kalinzi, don't learn from others to judge characters." After speaking, I bid farewell to Huanxi and left. Huanxi shook her head helplessly. Although she was only 20.2 years old, she was still a mother, so she could naturally understand why her eldest aunt was so angry. Behind the scenes, it is said that a man's son is as foolish as a pig or a dog. Whoever is left behind is not in a hurry. Huanxi said to Yichong. In the future, Yixiang must remain cautious in his words and actions, and not let anyone's words fall out. Yichong sighed and agreed, but he had no choice but to offend Sima Xingnan. Who would let his status be valuable and still take advantage of it? Sima Xingnan returned to the mansion and summoned Huanxi, saying earnestly. Son, you need to argue for your mother's reputation, don't let anyone underestimate you. Huanxi comforted and said. Although my mother can rest assured, the world is mocking me now, and in the future, they will find that they are the one who has been fooled by others. Sima Xingnan was extremely useful, and she smiled and said. Not bad, when we go to Jingzhou, let them take a good look at my son's abilities. Not to mention that Huanxi did it intentionally, even if he was truly foolish, in the eyes of Sima Xingnan, he was her impeccable son. Someone outside coughed lightly and interrupted their conversation. Seeing that it was Huan Wen, Sima Xingnan angrily said. I didn't see Sheer talking to me, what are you doing here? Huan Wen gave a dry laugh and said. Uncle Yen has come to Jiankang, and I will take Sheer to meet him. The Yen Shu mentioned by Huan Wen was precisely the Sima of Shuzhou and the Prime Minister of Guangling, Yuan Xiao, who was Huan Wen's most trusted confidant. He hastily asked his mother to resign. Seeing Huanxi so eager, Sima Xingnan had to let him go. Father and son were walking in the corridor when Huan Wen suddenly sighed. Sheer, remember to be a father. When we get married in the future, our appearance and family background are not important, and we need to be gentle and refined. You already have your mother at home. If you marry another unruly wife and come in, their mother.in.law and daughter.in.law will not give in, and we, the father and son, will also suffer along. Looking at Huan Wen's heroic and short-spirited appearance, Huanxi expressed deep sympathy. Suddenly, there was a servant behind him who respectfully referred to him as Madam. Huan Wen's back was cold, and he looked back anxiously. He saw that it was the wife of his second brother Huan Yun, and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Seeing Huanxi beside him, he couldn't help but laugh. Huan Wen became angry with embarrassment and glared at him fiercely. Huanxi could only suppress his laughter, and Huan Wen defended himself by saying. I'm not afraid of your mother, I just respect her and don't want to argue with her, which affects the harmony in the family. Ah, yes, what my father said is absolutely right. Huanxi nodded like pounding garlic, but his tone was somewhat perfunctory. In fact, Sima Xingnan acted with great moderation. Although she had a hot temper and even did not allow Huan Wen to take concubines, she always gave Huan Wen face in front of outsiders. If you have any temper, you will also vent it by closing the door in the inner house, and you will never give Huan Wen orders or shout back and forth in front of his subordinate officials. Why don't you believe it? Huan Wen glanced at him and Huanxi hurriedly said. My father is a hero respected by both Duke Yu and Yixiang. How could he be afraid of a woman? He is just a male lead outside and a female lead inside. My mother has to manage the servants of a large family, and my father does not want her to argue. He is also maintaining my mother's dignity in front of domestic slaves. Huan Wen smiled and said. That's right, what my son said is exactly what my father thought in his heart. Huanxi didn't criticize him either. Fear of the inner world was nothing. Even if Yang Jian became the emperor, he was also afraid of his wife. He even tasted the forbidden fruit and was discovered by Empress Dugu, who killed the palace maid with a knife. Yang Jian could only leave the palace in frustration. The father and son arrived at the front hall, where Yuan Xiao had already been waiting. Facing his subordinates, Huan Wen looked a different way, sitting in the main position and exuding a heroic aura. Yuan Xiao bowed, while Huan Wen nodded and said, no need for much courtesy. Uncle Yen has had a tiring journey and I have specially called you here today to introduce you to someone. Speaking, Huan Wen called out. Sheer, why don't you hurry up and pay your respects? Huanxi, who was standing behind Huan Wen, agreed and bowed to Yuan Xiao, saying, "Young man Huanxi, with the courtesy name Bo Dao, has met uncle." Yuan Xiao had already noticed the young man behind Huan Wen. Although Huanxi used to be kept in an inner house and rarely had guests, Yuan Xiao still had several connections with Huan Wen, but never had a conversation. Today, Huan Wen's grand introduction to him reminded Yuan Xiao of He Chang's comment. Huan Wen said solemnly, "I can leave Jingzhou. Xie has made a lot of efforts, but as for the rumors in the community, Uncle Yan doesn't need to pay attention to them." Yuan Xiao suddenly couldn't help but look at Huanxi differently, and he replied with a bow. "I have met young Master Yuan Xiao." Huan Wen introduced to Huanxi. Uncle Yan previously served as the minister of Guangling and went to Jingzhou to become the minister of Jiangxia and the general of Jianwu, overseeing the military affairs of Jiangxia, Sui, and the Yang counties. Huanxi took a step forward and, ignoring Yuan Xiao's surprise, tightly grasped his hand and laughed loudly. "I often hear my father praise Duke Yuan and have always wanted to make friends with you as a strategist. However, my father thinks that I am too young to take on any responsibilities and has bound me in the backyard. It is not in vain to meet Duke Yuan today." Yuan Xiao was greatly impressed by Huanxi's enthusiasm, and he did not doubt whether Huan Wen had praised him in front of Huanxi. After all, Huan Wen had always entrusted him with important responsibilities, and the term strategist was truly true. As early as when Huan Wen served as the general of the auxiliary country, he had invited Yuan Xiao as his sima, but Yuan Xiao did not accept it at that time. Afterwards, Huan Wen left Shuzhou and invited Yuan Xiao to join the shogunate. Yuan Xiao then volunteered to serve as the sima and the minister of Guangling, making him the first subordinate official of the Huan Wen shogunate. From the official position that Yuan Xiao will hold in Jingzhou, it can also be seen how much Huan Wen relies on him. Yuan Xiao didn't know if what Huanxi said was true or false, but Huan Wen couldn't help but know that he was just spreading rumors. Initially, due to Huanxi's mediocre qualifications, he never talked about official matters with him. But today Huanxi's way of dealing with people and things still made Huan Wen nod secretly. Obviously, Huan Wen was extremely satisfied with his actions. Introducing Huanxi to the mastermind Yuan Xiao not only shows Huan Wen's trust in Yuan Xiao, but also indicates that Huanxi will participate in the planning of military and political affairs in Jingzhou in the future. When Yuan Xiao left the Huan mansion, he turned around and looked inside the door, not only sighing. "Why do you think Huan Lang is a dolphin dog? He is really old and foolish." After receiving the imperial edict, Huan Wen did not rush to Jingzhou to take office. He had to stay in Jiankang for some time to recruit talented people. Although many officials from Shuzhou would follow Huan Wen to Jingzhou and search for the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com, as an important town, Jingzhou is not a small area for overseas Chinese to establish Shuzhou. These manpower are obviously insufficient. Huan Wen stayed in Jiankang for several days and brought many famous scholars under his command. Among them, the one that caught Huanxi's attention the most was Xie Yi from the Xie family in Qin County. Xie Yi and Huan Wen were good friends before their official career, and they were close friends in cloth. During Huan Wen's tenure as the governor of Shuzhou, Xie Yi was the governor of Jinling County in Yangzhou. Although their jurisdictions were similar, the two deliberately kept a distance and did not have much interaction. Until Huan Wen accepted the position of Jingzhou governor, his interactions with Xie Yi became frequent again. Xie Yi's second younger brother Xie Zhu's wife Wang Shi saw the situation and asserted that Huanxi, Huan Wen, was going to take Jinling, Xie Yi, to Jingzhou. As expected, Huan Wen quickly requested the imperial court to appoint him as the sima of General Xie Yianxi's mansion, and obtained the court's permission. The reason why Huanxi paid attention to Xie Yi was simple. Xie Yi's third brother was named Xian, and Xie Yi had a pair of children, who were also somewhat famous in later generations. Her daughter's name is Xie Daoyun, and her son's name is Xie Xian. Later generations were known as both Wang and Xie, but at this time, the Xie family in Qin County had not yet fully emerged. Huanxi followed his father Huan Wen's advice and did not easily show his wisdom in front of others before going to Jingzhou, so he still showed his foolishness. But there were exceptions as well. Huanxi invited one person to Princess Chang's mansion with the name of his father Huan Wen. That person is not very old, at least much younger than the famous scholars who travel to and from the mansion these days, only 19 years old. Master Shi, my master is waiting in the room. Please come in and have a chat. Shi Chao did not suspect any falsehood and stepped into the house. The window of the wing room was tightly closed and the light was dim, but Shi Chao could see it clearly. Above him was not Huan Wen, the governor of Jingzhou, but a young man in brocade. 5 Recruitment of famous scholars. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Before Shi Chao could figure out what was going on, Huanxi stood up and asked. Is the newcomer Gao Ping and Shi Jiuxing? Jiuxing is the character of Shi Chao. Although Shi Chao was puzzled, he still saluted with appropriate behavior. Exactly, may I ask your esteemed name? Huanxi introduced himself. I am under Huanxi. Speaking, Huanxi was afraid that Shi Chao wouldn't know him, so he added. He is the Huan family elder who has been ridiculed by others. Shi Chao was startled by the words and looked up and down at Huanxi. The young man in front of him had a smile on his face, staring at him. At least from the outside, there was no hint of foolishness. Huanxi smiled and said. Shi Lang, please sit down. Let me explain the reason slowly. Shi Chao sat in the guest seat, listening to Huanxi talk incessantly about how he ran for his father and why he pretended to be foolish in front of others. Shi Chao finally understood the cause and effect, and couldn't help but praise Huanxi repeatedly. However, there was still some confusion in his heart, and Shi Chao asked. Why is Huan Lang willing to be honest with me, as we have been ignorant of each other for a lifetime? He certainly knew that Huanxi was trying to recruit himself, but he didn't understand. Isn't Huanxi not afraid that he would leave the Huan mansion first and then announce today's matter to outsiders later? Huanxi smiled and said. I heard that Shi Lang is outstanding and extraordinary, with unparalleled talents. If he wants to recruit a national scholar, he should treat him with the courtesy of a national scholar. If he must be open and honest, he can't conceal anything. Shi Chao couldn't help but smile and say. Huan Lang said he wanted to treat him with the courtesy of a national scholar, but Huan Gong, Huan Wen, wanted to recruit me, but he didn't personally appear and instead asked Huan Lang to receive him on his behalf. Perhaps this was also the courtesy of a national scholar. Huanxi said solemnly. Inviting Shi Lang into the mansion was not my father's intention, but rather Huan's own initiative. She was extremely embarrassed and asked. Huan Lang's honesty is not afraid of Shi's anger and embarrassment, so he brushes away with his sleeve. Huanxi shook his head and said. My father is a hero in the world and has found a new place to use, making great achievements. And Shi Lang has talent, staying in Jiankang is like a hidden gem, only Jingzhou can allow Shi Lang to showcase his learning. Speaking, Huanxi stood up and gave guidance to Jiang Shan. In today's border crisis, the 2 bandits are the first to bear the brunt. The first is the Jia bandit, who has crossed the Central Plains. However, the ruler of his country, Shi Hu, is cruel and licentious, and he will not be able to last long. The second is the Shu bandits, who have been in the Han Dynasty for 5 generations. The late ruler Li Shou was extravagant, and the people were suffering. His son Li Shi was even more so, and sooner or later, chaos would inevitably arise. My father guards Jingzhou, sharpens his troops and horses, prepares his army for war, and when there is a change in the world, he can defeat Shu to the west, swallow Hu to the north, restore Shenzhou, and make immortal achievements. It is the right time. Huanxi's impassioned and passionate statement captivated Shi Chao. Huanxi calmed down his emotions and said solemnly. May I ask if Shi Lang wants to stay in Jiankang and live a peaceful life, or will he follow me to Jingzhou and achieve great success? Shi Chao exclaimed excitedly. The young master cordially invited me, but how can I refuse? If the young master doesn't give up, she is willing to follow the Huan family and participate in the grand event together. Shi Chao said he was following the Huan family, not himself. The implication was that he naturally hoped to join Huan Wen's sect, but Huanxi didn't care about it. As long as he deceived the person, there were ways for the other party to assist him in the future. Before Huanxi could be happy, he heard cheers coming from outside the door. A handsome middle-aged man walked into the room and it was Huan Wen. Huan Wen listened to the report from his trusted servant and learned that Huanxi had invited a young man to meet at the mansion with his famous invitation. Curious, he rushed over and happened to have listened to their conversation thoroughly. Huanxi quickly bowed. The child pays respects to their father. Upon seeing this, Shi Chao immediately bowed and said, I, Shi Chao, have met Duke Huan. Shi Chao is not very old, but he has already gained a great reputation. Previously, King Kuaiji Sima Yu appointed him as the Grand General of the Pacification Army and specially sent someone to recruit him as the prefect, but Shi Chao has not yet replied. Huan Wen knew about this matter, so he did not recruit him, but he did not expect Huanxi to invite this person into the mansion and get his help. No need for extra courtesy. Huan Wen looked at Shi Chao and said, My son is intelligent. After going to Jingzhou, I will entrust him with an important task. However, he is still young and lacks experience. I hope Shi Lang can assist him with his heart, and there will be a time when he can achieve success in the future. Having received Huan Wen's promise, Shi Chao had no further doubts. He was supposed to bid farewell and leave, but Huanxi stayed behind and insisted on having a night talk with him by candlelight. Shi Chao was also very curious about him, so he wrote a letter asking Huanxi to send someone to his home to report his family's safety. The two of them had a long conversation all night long. Shi Chao was impressed by Huanxi's insights, and Huanxi also admired Shi Chao's talent. Until dawn, they never had enough conversation, but eventually couldn't resist fatigue. The two of them slept together, and from then on, their relationship became even closer. The days of Jiankang are destined to not last long, and later will bring about changes. After recruiting many talents, Huan Wen and his wife Sima Xingnan went to Taichung to bid farewell to the Empress Dowager and the Emperor, and then took their officials and family to the dock. On the dock, it was crowded with people coming to bid farewell, and Zhang Xian came with his father to the dock. The officials who followed Huan Wen to Jingzhou naturally included Xie Yi and his family. The Xie family and the Zhang family share the same county and are neighbors. The two families have frequent interactions and have good relationships. Zhang Xian came here to bid farewell to Xie Yi with his father, and also to find out if the young man who impersonated Huan Chong that day was among them. In the crowd, Zhang Xian easily found the young man, who followed behind Huan Wen with a dull expression, no longer as agile as he had been that day. What is the name of that boy? Zhang Xian pointed to Huanxi and asked Xie Daoyun, the daughter of Xie Yi. Xie Daoyun looked in the direction pointed out by Zhang Xian and sneered. He is the eldest son of the Huan family, who was praised by Duke He. Xie Daoyun has always been arrogant, but how can she look up to Huanxi, who is foolish and unbeatable in front of others? Zhang Xian's face was strange, which aroused Xie Daoyun's curiosity. She asked the reason, but Zhang Xian just shook his head and remained silent. Xie Daoyun saw that he refused to speak up, so she stopped asking further questions. After bidding farewell to his friends, Xie Yi boarded the boat with his family. In the Xie family, a 3-year-old child waved goodbye to the crowd of people who were seeing him off. It was Xie Xian, the son of Xie Yi. Huanxi gazed at the Xie siblings and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. He went to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com and found Xie and indulging in the mountains and rivers, not accompanying his elder brother. Among the Xie brothers, only Xie Yi and his family came. Sister, that person is looking at you. Xia Xian tugged at Xia Daoyun's hand and whispered softly. Xia Daoyun looked at him and met Huanxi's 4 eyes. Huanxi smiled and nodded in greeting, but Xia Daoyun did not have a favorable impression of this young man who was similar in age to him. She only felt that he had a good skin, but his belly was full of recklessness. She looked down on such a person the most. Xia Daoyun hummed softly. He's just a fool. Speaking, he led Xia Xian towards the cabin, leaving only a proud figure for Huanxi. Huanxi couldn't hear what Xia Daoyun said clearly, but upon careful consideration, with his current reputation, he was afraid that he wouldn't leave a good impression on the other party either. Speaking of Zhang Xian, when he returned home, he went straight to his little sister Zhang Tongyan. Zhang Tongyan was playing the piano in the garden when he saw Zhang Xian rushing over. She chuckled softly and said, "Could it be that my elder brother found the young master who played the game that day?" Zhang Tongyan naturally knew Zhang Xian's intention to go to the dock to see him off. Zhang Xuanzhan first said, "People may have seen him and know his identity, but there are still some things they can't figure out." Zhang Tongyan curiously said, "Brother, why don't you understand? Who is that young master?" Zhang Xian did not hide from her. "That person is indeed not Huan Chong, but Huanxi, the eldest son of Duke Huan." This time it was Zhang Tongyan's turn to embroider and slightly open his mouth, which surprised him. After a moment, Zhang Tongyan couldn't help but smile and say, "These days, in Jiankong City, everyone laughed at him for being foolish." Unexpectedly, everyone was fooled by him. After all, the cunning young man who impersonated his uncle that day had nothing to do with foolishness. Lu Huanxi's Crying Coffin. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Since Yihuan crossed south, the capital of Jingzhou has undergone repeated changes. Wang Duanji Wuchang, now Azhou, Hubei, Tao Can ruled Mianyang before and Wuchang after, Wang Linji Jiangling, Yuliang governed Wuchang, Yue moved from Wuchang to Xianyang and later returned to Xiakou. Therefore, even though as early as the Western Jin Dynasty, Yangzhou was divided into Yuzhang, Poyang, Luling, Linchuan, Nankang, Jianan, and Jinan, as well as Wuchang, Guiyang, and Anqing in Jingzhou, totaling 10 commanderies and establishing Jiangzhou, Wuchang and other places were still under the control of the Jingzhou governor for a long time and used them as their capital. Xia Ko, the general's mansion for the western expedition, has received the appointment of Jingzhou governor from the imperial court. Upon learning that it will be Huan Wen who will replace him, Yue, who has been bedridden for a long time, is extremely disappointed. He understood that the power of the Yu family had basically come to an end. Yue was the younger brother of Empress Yu Wenjun of Jin Ming, and the uncle of Emperor Cheng and Emperor Kong of Jin. However, with the current Emperor Sima Dan, his relationship became somewhat distant. Empress Dowager Chu Xuanzi has her own maternal family, while Sima Dan also has her own maternal family. Compared to the Yu family, the Chu family is the more trusted relative of the mother and son. But Yue also understood that compared to his second son Yu Yuanji, Huan Wen was clearly more suitable for guarding Jingzhou. The ward was crowded with people, and Yu Yuanji angrily said, "The Yu family has been guarding the western domain for generations, and the court should have complied with the people's favor. At the request of their prospective father, they have now sent Huan Wen to take over. It is true that they have been deceiving others too much. Father, this edict cannot be accepted." The members of the Yu family also chattered incessantly. "That's right. This chaotic fate. Jingzhou cannot be ordered. The court thinks that our Yu family is weak and deceitful. Humph. What Wang Dun and Su Jun can do is that we cannot do it. It's all about how to manipulate power and bewitch the young master. We should raise our troops to the east and clear the emperor's side." Yue, who was lying on the hospital bed, stared coldly at the crowd until they all closed their mouths. Only then did he strengthen his spirit and ask, "What happened to Wang Dun and Su Jun?" Everyone remained silent. Wang Dun rebelled and died of illness in the army. His wife, concubines, and children were implicated, and Su Jun was defeated and killed. He was beheaded and dismembered, with no bones remaining. Yue closed his eyes and recalled the oath he had made with Huan Wen to help the world together. He said in pain, "I have been with Huan Wen for more than 10 years, and this person is far more talented than me. You are not his opponents. Now that Huan Wen has been ordered to take over Jingzhou, if he disobeys the order, there will be a disaster of annihilation. There is no lasting power in the world. Since Emperor Ming, the Yu family has been prominent and has gone through 4 dynasties. It is time to end it. I am not worthy of my position, but I am burdened by it. After arranging my funeral, you should not continue to stay in Jingzhou." "Father. Uncle. My lord." Everyone tried to persuade him, but Yue was determined and could not be changed. That night, general of the Western Expedition and governor of Jingzhou, who had aspired to the Northern Expedition, Yue, who had regained the Central Plains, died of illness in Xiakou at the age of 41. Huan Wen learned the news while traveling westward. Yue was not only the uncle of his wife Sima Xingnan, but also a benefactor who supported him and was his close friend. Now hearing the news of his death, Huan Wen's heart was filled with mixed feelings. He stood on the deck, looking west from afar, and his mood couldn't calm down for a long time. Huanxi walked on to Class A at some point and came behind Huan Wen, whispering, "Please prepare a fast boat for your child, and the child will first go to Xiakou to mourn and explore the way for your father." This statement moved Huan Wen very much. Although there were rumors that Yue had instructed the Yu family to leave Jingzhou before his death, who knew if Yuanji would obey Yue's will and give up his power? Huan Wen shook his head and refused, saying, "You are my legitimate eldest son, so there is no need to take risks lightly to gain my trust. In this matter, I can dispatch a subordinate official to avoid your mother blaming me again." Huanxi insisted. "How can an official's status be compared to a child? I still ask my father's permission." Others may not know the development of the situation, but Huanxi is very clear that the Yu family ultimately gave up Jingzhou in order to gain the power of the Huan family in the future. Therefore, Huanxi was well aware that there was no danger in this trip. Huan Wen hesitated for a moment, but ultimately nodded in agreement, only allowing Huanxi to speak to Sima Xingnan himself. After learning of his uncle's death, Sima Xingnan tearfully washed his face in the cabin. As the eldest daughter of Empress Yu, she had been favored by her uncles since childhood. Now, the 5 brothers of the Yu family, after Yu Liang, Yu Yi, Yu Bing, and Yu Tiao, the last uncle, Yu Yi, has also passed away. How can she not be sad about it? "Mother," the child requests his father's permission to go to Xiakou to mourn his uncle. Sima Xingnan didn't think about what Longtan Tiger Cave Xiakou was. Although his uncle died, Yuanji, who was in charge of Xiakou, was her cousin. In Sima Xingnan's mind, how could his mother's clan harm her son? "Good child, it's rare for you to have such filial piety." With the permission of Sima Xingnan, Huan Wendang immediately prepared a fast boat for Huanxi. Huanxi said goodbye to his parents wearing filial piety clothes, and he only brought one person to follow, which was Shi Chao. Xia Daoyun watched from a distance as Huanxi boarded the fast boat and sailed away from the fleet slowly sailing against the river. She was not sure how the rumored young man was entrusted with such a heavy responsibility. With Xia Daoyun's wisdom, of course, it is clear that Huanxi's trip is not just a mourning event, but also requires exploring the way for Huan Wen at Xiakou and understanding the attitude of the Yu family. Just as she was puzzled, she heard her father Xia Yi whispering to herself. The person who was on the same boat as the Grand Prince of the Huan family turned out to be the son of the Duke of Nanchang County, Shi Yin. He had previously refused the invitation of the King of Kuaiji, but instead wanted to go to Jingzhou to listen. Xia Daoyun mistakenly thought that Huanxi was just accompanying him, and that Shi Chao was the one who truly investigated the truth for Huan Wen, so he didn't take this matter to heart anymore. The Han River was formerly known as the Xia River, and the place where it enters the river is called the Xia Mouth. Xiakou was originally located in the north of the Yangtze River. During the Three Kingdoms period, Sun Quan built a city on the south bank of the Yangtze River, facing Xiakou across the river, which is now known as Xiakou City. The city is nestled against the mountains, facing danger and standing high above, making it easy to defend but difficult to attack. The fast ship gradually approached the dock, and Shi Chao asked, "Young master, are you not afraid of being taken hostage by the Yu family during this trip?" Huanxi said with a relaxed expression. Why should Jiuxing ask questions clearly? With the authority of Duke Yu, even if he dies, he can still intimidate his family. Besides, as a relative, if the Yu family were to make things difficult for me when I went to pay homage, wouldn't it be a shame for everyone around the world? Shi Chao naturally understood this truth, otherwise he would not have volunteered to accompany Huanxi. The ship docked, and the two of them walked onto the dock. Huanxi changed his previous calm demeanor, and his innocent face was filled with sadness. People were coming and going on the dock, and when they saw him wearing filial piety clothes, they all hurriedly avoided him. Only the Yu family was attending the funeral in Xiakou City. Those who came to mourn were either wealthy or noble, and ordinary people dared not clash with them. Upon arriving at the gate of Yu Mansion, Shi Chao handed Huanxi a calligraphy post. The receptionist, upon seeing Huan Wen's name, was shocked and quickly entered to report. Not long after, a rapid and chaotic sound of footsteps came from far to near, and it was Yu Yuanji, dressed in mourning clothes, who led the people in the mansion. Yu Yuanji breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the person who came was not Huan Wen, but Huanxi. He naturally recognized Huanxi, both of whom were relatives. Huan Wen and Yu Yi were close friends, and Sima Xingnan often brought his son to visit his uncle's house. Huanxi was ridiculed for He Chang's comments, but Yu Yuanji felt it was biased. Although his cousin's son was dull, he was not really stupid like a pig or a dog. "It's sheer here." Yu Yuanji, with a haggard face, forced a smile and said. Huanxi also had a gloomy expression. "Shi'er pays his respects to my uncle. I was ordered by my parents to come first to mourn. Please allow me to come in and offer incense to my uncle." "It should be so." Yu Yuanji led Huanxi into the auditorium, and the guests watched as the handsome young man whispered and discussed. Thanks to the blessings of He Chong, now Huanxi's reputation is very prominent. Zhaozuiyuan.com arriving at Yu Yi's coffin, Huanxi burst into tears and helped the coffin cry bitterly. "I still remember that my uncle and father made an appointment to assist the Jin family, but unfortunately he passed away young. Although there are billions of people living in the world, who can restore the Central Plains, rebuild the path of Shenzhou, and let go of my uncle and grandfather. Who can walk hand in hand with my father? My uncle has gone, and the Jin family has lost a pillar, my father has lost a confidant, and the people of Jingzhou have suffered the pain of losing their loved ones. Alas, the pain has broken the liver and intestines. In just a few words, it's hard to express sadness." Everyone was moved by his mournful expression and couldn't help but shed tears. Huanxi wiped away his tears and revealed a solemn expression that did not match his age. "Every day and every year, my uncle's ambition has not yet been extended. Today, Huanxi made a grand wish in front of his uncle's coffin to continue his uncle's legacy and assist his father in driving out the barbarians and pacifying the Central Plains in the north. On the day of success, I will burn incense to comfort my uncle's heroic spirit. If you violate this oath, be willing to die under the chaotic sword and cut off your descendants." All the guests in the room were in a fit of excitement, even Yu Yuanji was taken aback by Huanxi's oath. At this moment, no one among the guests mentioned the previous rumors about Huanxi's stupidity. Even if these words were taught by Huan Wen, it was not easy to say them so deeply. And Huanxi also got what he wanted, making a brilliant appearance in front of the scholars and people of Jingzhou. Only Shi Chao on the side knew that it was all Huanxi's own idea. He couldn't help but secretly feel. My father is already a hero of the time, and his son is young and has a cunning demeanor in his actions. With the efforts of both father and son generations, I am afraid that the old story of Chao usurping Han and Sima replacing Wei will not be repeated in the future. Thinking about this also strengthened Shi Chao's determination to assist the Huan family. 7 Rulers of the Western Cao Dynasty. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Shi Cao, also known as the Meritorious Chao, as the name suggests, is in charge of inspecting and recording the achievements of officials at all levels for promotion, while assisting the chief official and handling personnel selection and other matters. In short, the authority is similar to that of the Ministry of Personnel in the 3 provinces and 6 ministries. If the Anxi shogunate is seen as a court, then the Western Cao Lord Bo can be regarded as the Minister of Personnel. Not only in terms of personnel rights, Huan Wen allowed Huanxi to participate in confidential information. At the same time, at the request of Huanxi, Huan Wen appointed Shi Chao as the Western Cao Shuzhua to assist Huanxi. And these were all rewards that Huanxi deserved for his father's wandering around. But only a few people know the inside story. More people still have criticisms about this, believing that Huan Wen treats people with favoritism. In theory, it is also the power of the head of the government to appoint officials for military campaigns. Those who hold high positions at a young age are also well represented. For example, when Gan Luo was 12 years old and sent to the state of Zhao, he was appointed as a superior minister by the king of Qin. But no one has ever recruited their 14-year-old son into the shogunate like Huan Wen, and entrusted him with important responsibilities in a dignified manner. Especially some officials in the shogunate were waiting to see Huanxi's jokes. However, on the first day of Huanxi's appointment, he gave everyone a heavy blow. Huanxi followed Zhang Jiuxing's exam method and introduced his own assessment method. According to the new law, each official in the Yamen and the Western Cao shall establish regular limits on the tasks that their officials should undertake, register them in books, and have 2 copies in total. 1 copy shall be kept in the Yamen and the other copy shall be kept in the Western Cao. Afterwards, the Western Cao shall register the books and conduct regular inspections to evaluate the quality. In the conference hall of General Anxi's mansion, after the officials arrived, Huanxi stood in the room and chatted confidently. The key point of this law is to establish limits on the examination of matters, to hold individuals accountable and officials accountable. It is clear at a glance which officials are superior or inferior, and which ones are diligent or negligent. I call it the examination of achievements law. Among the officials, there are many who complain incessantly. They no longer doubt Huanxi's talent. After all, being able to pass the imperial examination has proven that he is qualified to manage the Western Cao, but this really goes against the current officialdom. In the Eastern Jin Dynasty, famous scholars were known for being impatient with mundane affairs and being free and easy. Nowadays, they have to undergo regular assessments. This is not forcing them to bury their heads in the paperwork, but also leaving no time to talk mysteries and explore the mountains and rivers. Huan Wen secretly remembered these people in his heart. He did not step forward to suppress dissatisfaction, but signaled Huanxi to continue. Huanxi certainly knew what the official atmosphere of the Eastern Jin Dynasty was, and he said seriously. My father guarded Jingzhou not only to defend the country's borders, but also to govern the world and rebuild the Shenzhou. Having extraordinary aspirations and doing extraordinary things, only by working together and striving for excellence can one achieve success. You are willing to follow my father to Jiangling, and I don't think you are just ordinary people. Why not follow this method, fulfill your duties, and work together with my father to assist the Jin family, leaving a good name for future generations? Everyone was speechless, but then Huan Wen spoke up. Huan Zhubo's method is quite reasonable, but it really goes against human sentiment. It's better to temporarily try it out in the Anxi shogunate to see the results. If it can be effective, it can be implemented in Jingzhou. Seeing that Huan Wen had spoken, the officials had no choice but to respond and go back to prepare for registering and recording the affairs of the generals. Huan Wen left Huanxi behind and said, "As a father, I greatly appreciate your method of passing the imperial examination. Otherwise, I wouldn't have summoned everyone to preach it to you. However, since my power has not yet been established, I can only try it out in the shogunate and promote it when it is collected in Sichuan. I understand my father's concerns, and he was able to give me the opportunity to speak freely in front of everyone. I am extremely grateful, and now that the new law can be implemented in the shogunate, it is even more surprising." Upon hearing this, Huan Wen was even more satisfied with his eldest son. The news of the Anxi shogunate's attempt to implement the Caoqing law quickly spread, but there were still many people questioning Huanxi's talent, believing that Huan Wen had put in a lot of effort for his son, and that the person behind the design of the Caoqing law was Huan Wen rather than Huanxi. After all, the implementation of a new law by a 14-year-old boy is truly shocking. Many people, including He Chong, hold this view. Hearing is false, seeing is believing. He personally took the exam for Huanxi. Previously, Yue held filial piety, but who knew that what Huanxi did was not learning from Huan Wen? But some people have greatly changed their views on Huanxi, such as Xie Daoyun, the daughter of Xie Yi. Is it true that this person is a talented person in the world? Xie Daoyun put down the ancient books in her hand and thought to herself. At this moment, the young Xie Xian ran over excitedly with his short legs. "Sister. Father has returned. Today is Shumu, but Xie Yi left early in the morning and said he was going to find Huan Wen to drink. Xie Yi is addicted to alcohol like his life. As long as he is not on duty, he will definitely get drunk like mud." Xie Daoyun stood up and said, "Got it, you should run slower to avoid bumping again." Speaking, she picked up Xie Xian and went to visit her father. Upon arriving at the hall, it was indeed true that Xie Yi was sitting in the main seat drunk, while the mother of the Xie siblings had a pleasant conversation with a young man. This young man, naturally recognized by Xie Daoyun, is exactly Huanxi. When the siblings came, Xie's mother introduced them. "This is the son of Huanxi." Xie Daoyun bowed and bowed. "Little girl Xie Daoyun, I have met Lord Huanbo." Huanxi stood up and said. It turned out to be the young lady of Yongxu. "I am under Huanxi, and this chamber has etiquette." Xie Daoyun has long been well known because when she watched the snow with her third uncle Xian, she said, "It's not like willow catkins rising in the wind." Her name as a talented woman spread like wildfire. Speaking, Huanxi said again. "This place is not the shogunate, so there is no need to call it an official position. Our two families are already close friends, and my courtesy name is Bodeo. The young lady can simply call me Biao. Xie Daoyun glanced at her mother and saw her nod before saying. "Since that's the case, Brother Bodeo doesn't need to call me young master. My father has given me the courtesy name Jiang. The two of them understood the Chinese characters, and Huanxi bent down to stroke Xie Xian's small head. He looked at Xie Daoyun and asked. "I don't know which young master of Xie Sima this is." Xie Daoyun introduced. "This is my younger brother Xie Xian." "Xie Xian, why don't you salute Brother Bo?" Xie Xian learned the title of elder sister with a milky voice and said. "Xie Xian has met Brother Bo." Huanxi couldn't help but laugh and say. "Your younger brother is innocent and innocent, truly likable." Speaking, Huanxi asked Xie's mother to resign, and Xie's mother ordered. "Daoyun, I'll help your father go back to his house to rest, and you can send me off Huan Lang." Xie Daoyun agreed and saw off Huanxi from the hall, while Xie Xian followed behind. Huanxi and Xie Daoyun were walking in the corridor, while Xie Xian was inserted between them. Huanxi had just praised Xie Xian for his innocence, but now he only feels disgusted by his face. While pondering what topic to find, Xie Daoyun suddenly asked. Everyone wants to make a name for themselves, but why did Brother Kibo behave clumsily when he was in Jiankang? Not only He Chong was clumsy in his eyes, but Huanxi had deliberately shown off in a slow and dull manner before. Xie Daoyun had also seen him before and was also deceived by him. After arriving in Jingzhou, it was clear that they were just two people. In just a few days, how could there be such a big change? Therefore, Xie Daoyun was convinced that Huanxi was intentionally doing it. Huanxi did not conceal anything and candidly said, "If I were to show my sharpness, I would be afraid that the court would leave me in Jiankang as a hostage and not be able to take office with my father. Therefore, when He Xiang tested me, I deliberately made numerous mistakes, and the court did not leave a stray dog in Jiankang." Xie Daoyun chuckled softly and said, "Is it not afraid of being hated by others if my elder brother fools the officials of the court?" Huanxi didn't mind and said, "The trees are beautiful in the forest, and the wind will surely destroy them, those who walk above others will not be able to do so. A true iron man who can withstand the test of heaven and not be envied is a mediocre talent. Only by living a comfortable and mediocre life can one avoid being held accountable by others." Upon hearing these words, Xie Daoyun's eyes lit up and she praised. The saying, being able to withstand the test of heaven is a true iron man, not being envied is a mediocre talent, is truly a wise one. Speaking, Xie Daoyun asked after him, "Brother, do you have the next sentence?" This line comes from a poem by Zhua Zongtang, and the following line naturally appeared in Huanxi's poem. However, the use of allusions in it is not suitable to express, so I had to shake my head and say, "I just stumbled upon a beautiful sentence." Xie Daoyun was slightly disappointed, but on second thought, she asked again, "Brother Shi, you also know poetry and literature?" Huanxi nodded and said, "I have learned a little, but as I grew older, I saw that the world was sinking and the people of the Central Plains were enslaved. I aspired to follow my father to expel the barbarians, so I wholeheartedly sought his father's advice on how to govern the army and save the country. I had no time to continue studying poetry and literature. Compared to governing the country and saving the people, poetry and literature are indeed minor paths." Xie Daoyun sighed and asked again, "I heard that Brother Bodeo made a solemn oath in front of Duke Yu's coffin. However, for decades, many predecessors' lofty aspirations have been difficult to fulfill. How confident does Brother Bodeo have?" Huanxi said solemnly, "Everything depends on human actions. I will do my best but cannot reach it. Although I die, I have no regrets." Upon hearing these words, Xie Daoyun exclaimed in admiration, "Brother Bodeo said it well. I wish you all the best." He rode his horse and raised his whip, heading north to conquer the Central Plains. Huanxi smiled and said, "Qingling Jiangjian." The two bid farewell at the door, and when Huanxi returned home, he was summoned by Huan Wen. The alcohol smell on Huan Wen's body had not dissipated yet, and he asked, "You have always had a purpose in your actions. Today, you took the initiative to send Wu Yi, Xie Yi, back to the mansion. Why is that?" The saying goes that no one knows their son like their father, and Huanxi did not conceal it. "Xie, the daughter of my parents, is talented and renowned. My child is willing to ask my father to hire her for me. As the saying goes, when it comes to marriage matters, the orders of parents, and the words of matchmakers, it is better to first clarify one's intentions, so as not to let Huan Wen randomly point out the list of romantic partners for him." Huan Wen shook his head and smiled, saying, "I knew you had hidden thoughts. Wu Yi's daughter is quick-witted and matches you well. The two families can be considered a perfect match, but you are young now and don't need to be so anxious. If you still haven't changed your mind after a few years, you will send someone to come and mediate for your father." In later generations, the Xie family was known as both Wang and Xie, but today's Xie family is not a top-class aristocrat. The true rise of the Xie family, able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Langya Wang family, had to be after Xian came to power. Huanxi was overjoyed. He knew that as long as Xian did not interfere with the friendship between Huan Wen and Xie, as well as Huan Wen's future power, this marriage could be considered a certainty. The reason why Huan Wen did not stop Huanxi from thinking about Xie Daoyun is also related to the strength of the Xie family. Although the Xie family of Chen County is not as powerful as the Wang family of Langjia, they are also feudal lords of the region. Xie Yi's cousin Xie Shang was the general of Zizinglang, in charge of the military affairs of the 6 counties in Yangzhou, the governor of Yuzhou, and the fake festival, guarding Liyang. 8 Phoenix seeks wutong, 4700. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. On the river west of Jiangling, a large ship approached and gradually approached the dock. A middle-aged man on the ship stood up against the wind, who was the general of the conquest and the governor of Yizhou, Zhou Fu, who came to pay respects to Huan Wen. This Yizhou, not the other Yizhou, is still under the rule of the Cheng Dynasty in Shu. Yizhou was established by the Eastern Jin Dynasty's overseas Chinese and governed by Wu County in Jianping County, now Wushan, Chongqing. Huan Wen was in charge of the military affairs in the 6 provinces of Jing, Si, Yong, Yi, Liang, and Ning, with Zhou Fu, the governor of Yizhou, naturally serving as his subordinate. The father of Zhou Fu was a famous general of the Eastern Jin Dynasty, Zhou Sun, from the Han ethnic group. In his later years, his father trained in Liangzhou to resist the general Wang Dun who was guarding Jingzhou. After his father's death, Zhou Fu led the governor of Wuchang and became Wang Dun's confidant, Ingo. After Wang Dun's downfall, he was able to exert his power from his brother Wang, and Zhou Fu was pardoned and re-served. Due to his contributions in quelling the Su Jun rebellion, he was dispatched to guard Xiangyang. However, he mistakenly believed in the plan of Guojing, a famous general of later Zhao, to bathe horses in a cycle. He believed that later Zhao had launched a large-scale attack and abandoned the city, causing later Zhao to capture Xiangyang. As a result, Zhou Fu was dismissed from office. Although the governor of Jingzhou, Tao Can, later sent troops to recapture Xiangyang, Xinye and other places, drove away Guojing, and Zhou Fu was also appointed again, Zhou Fu always regarded this matter as a great shame and wanted to make contributions and wash away the humiliation. Today, Zhou Fu came to Jiangling to pay his respects to Huan Wen, but more importantly, to persuade him to attack Shu. Father, look. It seems that someone is waiting at the dock. His son Zhou Chu pointed ahead and shouted. Zhou Fu looked around and saw that there was indeed a young man in brocade waiting at the port surrounded by servants. Duke Huan must have sent his son to greet him. Zhou Fu said that when it comes to Huan Wen, his son, he has been in the limelight lately. At first, everyone criticized Huan Wen for favoritism, but it was not until Huanxi introduced a mixed evaluation system that the questioning was suppressed. And Huanxi, with the assistance of Shi Chao, the assistant secretary of the Western Cao, handled the affairs of the Western Cao in an orderly manner, completely dispelling doubts about his abilities from officials, and was praised as a young phoenix. The big boat docked, and Zhou Fu got off the boat. The young man in brocade walked over with a smile on his face, and Zhou Fu joked. But in front of Qifeng. The person with a stiff smile was none other than Huanxi. Huanxi didn't know who was so immoral. He gave himself the name of a young phoenix. Didn't he know that he still wanted to follow his father to conquer Shu? How unlucky. Fortunately, Huanxi would not show his true joy and anger on his face on weekdays, and he still smiled and saluted, saying. The young man Huanxi was ordered by his father to come and welcome Zhou Zhenglu. Zhou Fu helped Huanxi up and smiled, saying. Thank you for your kind hospitality, there is no need for much courtesy. As he spoke, he introduced his son Zhou Chu to Huanxi. After some pleasantries, Huanxi welcomed Zhou Fu and others into Jiangling. General Anxi's mansion. Zhou Fu and his group were warmly received by Huan Wen. Faced with Zhou Fu's persuasion to attack Shu, Huan Wen smiled loudly and said. The reason why I govern Jiangling is precisely because I have the ambition to pacify the Shu bandits, and I also need General Zhou's help. Zhou Fu was overjoyed. That night, Huan Wen had a long conversation with Zhou Fu. Zhou Fu was impressed by Huan Wen's demeanor and speech, and Huan Wen also believed that Zhou Fu could fulfill his duties. Their relationship quickly heated up, and from then on, Zhou Fu was introduced by Huan Wen as a confidant. When Zhou Fu left Jiangling, he deliberately left his son Zhou Chu in Jiangling to serve around Huan Wen. Huan Wen then appointed Zhou Chu to serve in the shogunate and arranged for him to work with Huanxi in Shizhou. Its purpose is self-evident. It can be said that in order to conquer Shu and establish power, Huan Wen pacified soldiers and horses in Jiangling, while Huanxi diligently assisted his father. Yicheng naturally heard about Huanxi's actions in Jiangling, but at this time, he had no intention of venting his anger towards a young man. Since the beginning of winter, Yicheng has been bedridden at home and has even gone to Taichung less frequently. Yicheng is sick and cannot take care of himself, so who will take over him has become the top priority. Empress Dowager Chu, at the request of Yicheng, summoned her father Chu Hui to serve as the governor of Yangzhou and the recorder of books, overseeing the affairs of the court. But the minister of personnel, Lu Xia, and the commander-in-chief of the guard, Wang Huji, among others, tried their best to stop him, believing that King Kuaiji, Sima Yu, should be regarded as Duke of Zhou and all national affairs should be handed over to him. Chu Huan dared not exercise absolute power and had to resign from the imperial recruitment. He returned to his fiefdom and became the commander-in-chief of the military forces of Su, Yan, Qingzhou, and Yangzhou, as well as the general of the guards and the governor of Su and Yanzhou. He continued to replace Huan Wen and guard Jinko. Sima Yu reported to Li that he was appointed as the Grand General for the Northern Expedition and the 3 departments for the establishment of the Imperial Palace by Chu Shi. Chu Shi accepted the title of general, but refused the power to establish the Imperial Palace. His humility and caution were evident. In the first year of Yonghe, at the end of the year, near New Year's Eve, the city of Jiangling had already begun to display lights and decorations. Xie Yi, who was staying at home, once again enthusiastically went to find Huan Wen to drink. Huan Wen heard that Xie Yi was visiting, so he was afraid of avoiding it and quickly hid in his wife Sima Xingnan's bedroom. He complained to Sima Xingnan about Xie Yi's excessive drinking and promiscuous behavior. Seeing his husband's appearance, Sima Xingnan couldn't help but laugh. If it weren't for the debauchery of Sima, how could I have seen you during the day? But soon Sima Xingnan couldn't laugh anymore. The servant came to report, and Huanxi was pulled over by Xie Yi to drink together in the hall. Wine and lust harm the body. My own son is young, how can he associate with Xie Yi, a drunken man? Sima Xingnan angrily searched over, but Huan Wenla couldn't hold back. Outside the hall, before entering, Xie Yi burst into laughter and said, I came to Huan Wen today and didn't want to lose an old soldier, but I got a small soldier. Upon hearing his words, Sima Xingnan was even more infuriated, and calling Huan Wen and Huanxi father and son soldiers was not a good thing, at least under the prevailing culture of this era. Just as he was about to enter the door to look for Xie Yi's misfortune, Huan Wen quickly stopped her and lowered his voice, saying that he had broken his lip. Finally, he managed to coax Sima Xingnan down and only then did he enter the door, replacing Huanxi and drinking with Xie Yi. The two of them were talking and laughing, and Xie Yi was not angry for Huan Wen avoiding him. Huan Wen also did not hold a grudge against him for mocking him as an old soldier. Huanxi was granted amnesty, he could drink alcohol, but he was not good at drinking. He was also puzzled when Huan Wen was so interesting that he actually helped himself out of the situation. It wasn't until he saw Sima Xingnan outside the hall that he understood the reason behind it. Seeing that Sima Xingnan's remaining anger had not dissipated, Huanxi comforted and said, Xie Sima is an outsider with a free-spirited personality, so my mother should not hold any grudges against him. Sima Xingnan snorted. You father and son are both talking to him. Those who don't know the inside story thought you were the only family. Huanxi smiled but remained silent. After 3 rounds of drinking, Xie happily bid farewell, and Huanxi quickly joined in to escort Xie back. Huan Wen knew what this kid was up to, and he couldn't resist it. Watching Huanxi please help Xie leave, Sima Xingnan was dissatisfied and said. Xie has never respected me so much before, and Xie is nothing but he da and he nang. Huan Wen smiled and said. Perhaps they have raised a good daughter. Sima Xingnan looked sideways, as if she had discovered a big secret and grabbed Huan Wen's beard. Old slave. What are you hiding from me? Huan Wen quickly begged for mercy and immediately informed Huanxi of his heartfelt gratitude to his parents and daughters. Huan Wen said. Xie's daughter is well known, and I have seen her before. She doesn't seem like a stubborn woman. What? Are you saying I'm being stubborn and capricious? Huan Wen's just loosened beard was caught again, and Sima Xingnan stared at him fiercely. Madam. You are unjustly accused. You have always been gentle and elegant, and have a good family. This is also a well-known fact. Which of the civil and military officials in the Manchu dynasty did not envy Huan's family for having a virtuous wife? Sima Xingnan finally let go of his hand in satisfaction and hummed. In the future, I must always remember my good deeds in my heart, and not be unaware of them when I am in the midst of blessings. Huan Wen combed his beard, but he dared not raise any objections. Xie Mansion, backyard. Sister, Brother Huan from the Huan family has come to visit again. Xie Quan went to the elder sister Xie Daoyun's boudoir and reported the message. Xie has 8 sons and 4 daughters, including Xie Jinu, Xie Tanyuan, Xie Quan, Xie Yu, Xie Jing, Xie Hua, Xie Xian, and Xie Kong. The 4 women are Xie Daoyun, Xie Daorong, Xie Daocan, and Xie Daohui. Among them, the eldest son Xie Jinu and the second son Xie Tanyuan died young. Among the children in the family, Xie Daoyun was the oldest, only 1 year younger than Huanxi. Got it. Xie Daoyun agreed, but had no intention of getting up. Although she is not very old, she has been intelligent since childhood. Since they met, Huanxi runs very frequently to the Xie family, and Xie Daoyun gradually sensed his thoughts. Xie Daoyun didn't know how to face Huanxi, so she had to deliberately avoid him. For some unknown reason, it was heard that Huanxi was visiting and couldn't read the book in his hand. Xie Daoyun hesitated for a while, but eventually walked out of her boudoir. Arriving at the hall, only his mother was present, but there was no trace of Huanxi. Without waiting for Xie Daoyun to inquire, Xie's mother teased and said. Without seeing the wutong tree, the young phoenix returned disappointed. Mother is talking nonsense. Xie Daoyun blushed and distressed. Xie's mother is also a discerning person, and she smiled and said. The phoenix doesn't live in wutong, but it's not that my family planted a wutong tree that attracted the young phoenix. Xie's mother has been satisfied with Huanxi to this day. In terms of appearance, he was born with handsome eyebrows and eyes, and was a graceful young master. In terms of family background, his mother Gui was Princess Chang of Nankang, the aunt of the current emperor, and his father was the governor of Jingzhou, the most powerful feudal domain of the current dynasty, with great power. When it comes to talent, Huanxi took charge of the Western Cao at the age of 14, handling affairs efficiently and earning the reputation of a young phoenix. The most rare thing is his witty speech. Such a young man, Xie's mother is also happy to see him as her son.in.law. Xie Daoyun felt very embarrassed, stomped her foot, but ran away and hurriedly returned to the backyard. Time passed by in a flash, and the second year of Yonghe arrived as scheduled. In January, there was bad news from Jiankang that He Chong passed away at home at the age of 55. Huan Wen sent someone to Jiankang to offer condolences, originally to let Huanxi go. Previously, he wept and mourned Yue, which can be said to be touching. Huanxi was afraid of being taken hostage and firmly refused. Huan Wen had no choice but to send his soldier Sun Xing to Jiankong on his behalf. Sun Xing comes from the Sun family in Taiyuan and is known for his erudition. He was originally a staff member of Yue, but after the Yu family left Jingzhou, he was left behind by Huan Wen in the Anxi shogunate. Shortly thereafter, the court posthumously honored He Chong as the Minister of Works and posthumously named him Wenmu. Wei Chong had no children under his knee and adopted his nephew He Fang as his successor. With the death of He Chong, the power structure in the court changed once again. Empress Dowager Chu naturally dared not let King Kuaiji, Sima Yu, rule the court for a long time. After all, at present, Sima Yu is the biggest threat to their mother and son. Her father Chu Hui refused to enter the court, so Empress Dowager Chu appointed Left Guanglu Grand Tutor Kai Mo to lead the situ and assist with Sima Yu in politics. In March, Chu Gui recommended Gu He, a former high-ranking official in Guanglu, and Shirin Hao, a former left chief of the Ministry of Personnel. Empress Dowager Chu appointed Gu He as the Minister of Personnel, and Yin Hao as the General of Jianwu and Governor of Yangzhou. Gu He resigned from his position at the time of his mother's funeral, while Yin Hao, upon seeing this, also requested his resignation from the court. In the end, it was Sima Yu who persuaded Yin Hao to take office through a letter. Huanxi lived a fulfilling life in Jiangling. In addition to his busy official duties, he always found ways to visit the Xie family, and Xie Daoyun no longer deliberately avoided them. The two of them exchanged poems and essays, discussed their aspirations, and secretly developed feelings for each other. Just when Huanxi thought the peaceful days would pass like this, until his father Huan Wen was fully prepared and sent troops to attack Shu, in late August, Xie Quan suddenly came to Huanfu. He found Huanxi and told him, "Uncle San wrote a letter requesting to take our siblings to Jiankong for residence and set off tomorrow." Originally, Xie Yi had official duties and spent his rest days drinking alcohol, leaving him with no time to discipline his children. Xie knew about this matter and sent someone to deliver a letter to Jiangling, hoping that Xie Yi could send his children to Jiankong for him to raise. Xie Yi was even more eager for this. Among his own brothers, his third brother Xian was the most outstanding. How could Xie Yi not trust him to discipline his children? Upon hearing this, Huanxi was greatly surprised. After Xie Quan left, Huanxi went straight to Huan Wen and begged him to propose marriage to the Xie family. He arranged for his marriage and could not wait for a few years before marrying Xie Daoyun. Huan Wen didn't tire of it, and seeing him persist like this, he knew that if he didn't agree, he might not be able to live peacefully in the future. All right, I'll talk to Wei later." Huan Wen had to agree to him. Huanxi was overjoyed and quickly helped Huan Wen beat his back and rub his shoulders, showing great hospitality. Huan Wen said helplessly, "Why does a man suffer from having no wife? I don't know why you recognized Wu Yi's daughter." Huanxi said seriously, "Xie's daughter is both talented and beautiful. The child doesn't want to miss her and will regret her for life in the future." Under the constant urging of Huanxi, Huan Wen finally went out in the dark. Xie Yi was surprised to see Huan Wen's late-night visit. "On weekdays, Yuanzi didn't have time to hide from me. Today, he actually took the initiative to visit, which is quite a rare guest." The two of them had a deep friendship, and Huan Wen also knew that Xie Yi was joking with him. There was no need for the host to invite him, so he sat down on his own and said, "I came today on behalf of someone else. Xie Yi is even more strange. Surprisingly, there are still people in Jiangling City who can invite Huanxi. I want to listen attentively. What's the big deal?" Huan Wen smiled and said, "As parents, what is more important than children's marriage?" Xie Yi suddenly realized that Huanxi was so careful that even Xie Mu and Xie Daoyun could sense it. How could Xie Yi know nothing? Huanxi and Xie Daoyun were of similar age and matched in family. Xie Yi also admired Huanxi very much. Now that his close friend personally came to propose marriage, how could Xie Yi refuse? In the hall, Huan Wen and Xie Yi clapped their hands as an oath, making a marriage agreement for Huanxi and Xie Daoyun. The two of them drank and had a hearty conversation. Sister, it's amazing. Uncle Huan from the Huan family has come to propose marriage to his father. As the second sister Xie Daorong shouted, the book in Xie Daoyun's hand fell to the ground. She stood up nervously. Take this seriously. Xie Quan gasped for thick airways. It's absolutely true. After hearing it from outside the door, I immediately reported it to you. How did the father respond? I was eager to tell you, but I didn't pay attention. Upon hearing this, Xie Daoyun felt even more uneasy. She hurriedly rushed to the hall, only to run into her mother in the corridor. Daughter pays respects to mother. Xie's mother nodded and said, I'm in such a hurry, but I have to go see your father. Xie Daoyun lowered her head without answering, and Xie's mother smiled and said, Go back, your father is drinking with Duke Huan. Marriage is not something you can decide on your own. Xie Daoyun was relieved to hear the words, drink freely. Huan Wen got drunk and went to the Shuyuan website www.jiaoshuyuan.com, but when he returned home, he didn't forget to tell Huanxi the good news. Huanxi was overjoyed by it. The next morning, Xie Yi was busy with business, and only Xie's mother saw off her children at the dock. Xie Daoyun occasionally glanced behind her, but never saw anyone, feeling a bit disappointed in her heart. Xie's mother knew her daughter's thoughts and comforted her, saying, Don't worry, that phoenix will eventually come. As soon as the words fell, the sound of hooves echoed from behind. Xie's mother turned around and smiled, saying, Look, isn't this just here? The person who came was Huanxi. Xie's mother first escorted Xie Quan and others onto the ship, leaving only Xie Daoyun to have a conversation with Huanxi alone. 4-year-old Xie Xian clamored to bid farewell to the Huan brothers, but was carried away by Xie's mother. Huanxi flipped over and dismounted. He had now shed his sickly state, but he had been persistently exercising his physique, with equestrian archery being the most hard-working. Last night, I found out that Duke Xie had agreed to our marriage. I was too excited and didn't fall asleep until the second half of the night. If it weren't for my mother waking me up, I would have almost missed the hour. Huanxi explained. Xie Daoyun's cheeks turned red, and she shyly said, I just asked my third brother to tell you, but I didn't ask you to propose marriage to Duke Huan. Huanxi smiled and said, I am too eager, afraid of missing a good marriage. Upon hearing these words, Xie Daoyun was filled with joy in her heart. The two parted ways with reluctance, and Huanxi took Xie Daoyun's hand and said seriously, You can stay in Jiankang and wait for a few years. With Xie Wang's consent, I will go to Jiankang to pick you up and get married. Xie Daoyun did not withdraw her hand, just lowered her head and let out a gentle hum. Jiuxing Army conquers Shu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Xie Daoyun left, Huanxi did not seem to have lost his soul. Instead, he devoted himself wholeheartedly to the work of the shogunate, assisting his father Huan Wen in the military battle. In the second year of Yonghe, 346 AD, in October, early winter, internal strife broke out in Sichuan. During the Han Dynasty, Li Yi, the Grand Protector, rebelled since the reign of Jin Shou. Due to the incompetence of the ruler Li Shi, tens of thousands of people responded. At this time, Huan Wen had been sitting in Jiangling for over a year. Upon learning of the chaos in Shu, Huan Wen believed that the time was ripe to attack Shu and urgently ordered his mastermind, Yuan Xiao, the Prime Minister of Jiangxia, to come and discuss. Jiangling, General Anxi's mansion. When Huan Wen revealed his intention to attack Shu to everyone, Jiangling generals all thought it was impossible and believed that Li Yi's rebellion, although grand in scale, was difficult to achieve. Worried that the later Zhao would attack Jingzhou, they all advised Huan Wen not to send troops easily. Only Huanxi and Yuan Xiao expressed their support, and Huanxi said in a serious tone. Nowadays, the bandits of Jia are strong while the bandits of Shu are weak. It is easier to obtain the wealth of Shu and use it for the northern expedition. The nobles were worried about the invasion of later Zhao, but the troops attacking Shu were not very elite, leaving behind some soldiers who relied on the danger of the Yangtze River to resist the invading enemy. Admittedly, Li Yi is not capable of achieving success, but when he rises to the top, there are many domestic applicants, which shows that people's hearts are turned against each other. Opportunity is inevitable, please don't hesitate, father. Jiang Xiaoling Yuan Xiao agreed. Huan Zhubo's words are extremely accurate. The Lord does not need to mobilize a large army, only needs to select 10,000 elite soldiers and light troops to advance quickly. By the time the Shu invaders discover it, our army has already passed through a dangerous pass and can defeat their country in one battle. Shu is rich and has numerous household registrations, which Zhuge Wuhou used to counter the Middle Xia dynasty. If obtained, it would benefit the country greatly. If we abandon it and ignore it, making it occupy the upper reaches, sooner or later we will surely suffer greatly. Huan Wen had the intention of attacking Shu for a long time, and now with the support of Huanxi and Yuan Xiao, he immediately ordered Yuan Xiao as the vanguard, personally leading General Zhou Fu and General Sima Wuji to lead 10,000 elite soldiers to the west. His son Huanxi volunteered and was left by Huan Wen to participate in military affairs, without commanding the troops. Huan Wen also appointed Changsher Fan Wang to guard Jiangling and oversee the military affairs of the 4 counties in Liangzhou. Fan Wang was originally a clerk to Yu Liang, serving him for more than 10 years. After Yu Liang's death, he became a subordinate official of Yu Yi. After Huan Wen defended Jingzhou, he stayed in the shogunate as the chief censor. Although Huan Wen submitted a report to the court to report this matter, his troops were of great value and speed. He obviously couldn't wait for the court's response. The day after the report was sent, he would send troops. In November, Jiangling is in the midst of a cold winter, with crowds of people bidding farewell outside the city. Sima Xingnan looked at his eldest son with tearful eyes and complained. The military situation is dangerous, why do you have to follow along? Huanxi wiped away his tears for his mother and said. If there is something to do, the disciple will serve their labor, which is filial piety. My father is fighting on the front line, how can I sit back and enjoy the benefits? Sima Xingnan knew he couldn't speak to him, so he advised Huan Wen. General, please take care of Xi'er for me. In public, she still saved face for Huan Wen, and in normal times, it was just calling out to the old slave. Huan Wen smiled and comforted, saying. Xi'er is following me, where did the danger come from? Huanxi left with great eyes, not disturbing the couple's farewell. He summoned his second brother Huanji to his side and explained. When my father and I are not here, you must not make my mother angry. Don't be naughty and take good care of your younger brothers and sisters. Huanji nodded repeatedly. The military horn sounded, and Yuan Xiao led 2,000 elite soldiers as the vanguard. Huan Wen, following 8,000 others, left Jiangling and marched westward in a grand manner. When Huan Wen's memorial to attack Shu was delivered to Jiankang, the imperial court was shocked. The ministers all believed that the Shu region was perilous and far away, while Huan Wen, with a force of 10,000 and a lone army, would inevitably face more misfortune than good. Even Xie Daoyun couldn't help but worry about Huanxi when she heard that he was going on a military expedition with his father. Jiankang, Wui Lane, Zhang Mansion Liangting. Xie Daoyun, at the previous invitation of Zhang Tongyun, came to the mansion to compete with her. In terms of chess skills, Xie Daoyun is even better than Zhang Tongyun, but today she frequently uses weak moves. Why is Jiang absent? Minded. Zhang Tongyun held the chess and dropped a piece, puzzled. Xie Daoyun surrendered and shook her head, saying. I'm feeling unwell today and cannot play chess with my sister. Please forgive me. After speaking, Xie Daoyun stood up to bid farewell. Zhang Tongyun thought she had come for a lunar event, but did not inquire about the reason. Although the public opinion is not optimistic about Huan Wen's campaign against Shu, there are also people who believe that he will succeed, either by instigating Prince Kuaiji Sima to go out of town or by allowing him to defend Jingzhou himself, such as Lu Qing. After Yu Yi's death, Huan Wen defended Jingzhou, while Lu Qing replaced Yu Yi's eldest son Huanxi as the governor of Yicheng, overseeing various military forces in Mianzhong. Some people were puzzled as to why Lu Qing firmly believed that Huan Wen could succeed, but Lu Qing said, "In the past, when I played with Huan Wen Bo, he didn't have full confidence and wouldn't take action. From this, I know that I was only worried that Huan Wen would destroy Shu and use it to rule the court." Everyone didn't agree with this. Speaking of Huan Wen, shortly after the deployment of the army, there was suddenly bad news in Shu, and the rebellion of Li Yi had been quelled. It turned out that Li Yi led the army to attack Chengdu, and he rode alone to seize the gate, but was shot and killed by the soldiers guarding the gate, causing the crowd to scatter. Huan Wen originally took advantage of the turmoil in the Chenghan kingdom to send troops. Now that the Li Yi rebellion has dramatically ended, some generals have seen this and contacted the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com, thinking that the luck of the Chenghan kingdom is still strong. They couldn't help but feel the urge to withdraw. Upon seeing this, Huan Wen prepared to summon generals to predict good or bad luck in order to boost morale in the army. He has already said hello to the diviner and will definitely receive an auspicious omen, using magic to defeat magic. Unexpectedly, when General Zhuqi gathered at the commander's tent, Buja had not yet grilled the turtle shell when Huanxi snatched it away. He complained to everyone in pain. "Everyone knows that we are attacking Shu. If we retreat without firing a single arrow, wouldn't we be laughed at by the people of the world? Huanxi would rather die than bear the name of cowardice and weakness. The matter has come to this point, the arrow is on the string, and we have to take action. The fate is in Jin, how can it be owned by the Shu bandits?" Li Shi was in a daze, and Li Yi's defeat was a disaster rather than a blessing for Qinghua. How could it be said that the luck of the Shu bandits had not stopped? I am also worried that Li Yi will replace the Yong Lord, work hard to govern, and become our great enemy in Jingzhou. After speaking, Huanxi smashed the turtle shell onto the ground, stomping on it with one foot, causing the old diviner's face to twitch and feel heartbroken. General Zhua in the army was unable to refute. Upon seeing this, Huan Wen drew his sword and said to the crowd, "I have made up my mind. If I dare to speak out and withdraw again, it will disrupt my military morale. Such a case." Speaking, he cut off a corner of the table with a single slash. This scene made Huanxi's heart skip a beat, fearing that Huan Wen's sword might not be sharp enough. "If you keep chopping the corners of the table, it will be a joke." From then on, the Jin army, which was attacking Shu, finally united and no one dared to persuade Huan Wen to retreat. When the light troops of the Jin army advanced rapidly, the rulers and ministers of Chenghan did not have time to react, allowing the Jin army to pass through dangerous passes and penetrate deep into Shu after fighting bravely. The news reached Chengdu, and the ruler Li Shi was extremely frightened. He urgently ordered the right guard General Li Fu, the Zhenan General Li Quan, and the former General Zan Jian to lead troops to block the Jin army. Rushing to Chengdu. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. In the third year of Yonghe, 347 AD, in February, Huan Wen's army of attacking Shu marched to Qingyi, now north of Mingshan in Sichuan. Since the deployment of troops in November last year, even when the enemy was unprepared and light troops advanced rapidly, they had walked for a full 3 months, during which they conquered countless obstacles, demonstrating the difficulty of entering Shu. Huanxi was aware of the success or failure of this battle, so he did not intervene too much in Huan Wen's decisions, fearing that he would meddle and change the outcome of the situation. He often listens to military discussions as an observer, rather than easily expressing his own opinions. Of course, during the 3 months he followed his father on the expedition, Huanxi also gained something of his own. At the military level, he learned a lot from Huan Wen's words and deeds. Huan Wen's military talent cannot be called top-notch, and among the famous generals of his time, he is still much inferior to the great general of the Yan royal family, Murong Chui. Of course, Murong joined the army at the age of 13 and never suffered a defeat in his life. He could be hailed as the first god of war in the 16 kingdoms by later generations, but he was not an ordinary person. At least in today's Jiangnan, it is difficult to find someone who can rival Huan Wen in military talent. For Huanxi, his father was the best teacher. Huan Wen naturally generously bestowed upon his eldest son without reservation. Whenever Huanxi had any doubts during the march, he would patiently answer them. And Huanxi's displayed intelligence also greatly pleased Huan Wen. The Chengdu side was led by 3 generals, Li Fu, Li Quan, and Zhang Jian, to resist the Jin army. Li Fu and Zhang Jian's troops arrived at Heshui, now the confluence of the Fu River and the Min River in Pingshan County, Sichuan. The generals of the Han army requested to set up defenses south of the Minjiang River, waiting for exhaustion. However, Zhang Jian strongly advocated taking the initiative to cross the Minjiang River and advance towards Jianwei, now east of Pingshan County, Sichuan, to confront the Jin army. Li Fu was convinced by Zhang Jian, and the 2 of them went east, but they happened to be traveling in a different direction from the Jin army. In March, the Jin army arrived in Pengma, now southeast of Pingshan County, Sichuan. Huan Wen held a military meeting in Pengma to discuss the next action plan. A general suggested that Huan Wen's troops split into 2 routes and advance side by side. Pioneer Yuan Xiao took the lead in opposing. Now our army is hanging alone thousands of miles away. If we win, we can achieve great success, but if we lose, we will have no bones left. Let's unite our forces to achieve victory in one battle. It's better to burn our boats and carry only 3 days' worth of food, and the whole army will advance to show our determination. We will definitely win. It has to be said that Yuan Xiao's plan is bold. If he cannot capture Chengdu, he will inevitably fall into a dangerous situation of running out of ammunition and food, making it unsustainable. Amidst the buzzing of discussions in the commander's tent, Huanxi, who had always kept his mouth shut, stood up to support Yuan Xiao. Our army has few soldiers, how can we divide our troops and advance together, father? The child thought that if he came a few ways, I would only go one way, leaving a small number of soldiers to guard the supplies, and the army would launch a surprise attack on Chengdu. Li Shi saw that our troops were low, so he would hastily leave the city to confront them. If he could defeat them in one battle, he would be able to capture Chengdu and then force the surrender of the Shu bandits. Yuan Xiao cast a grateful gaze at Huanxi. From the beginning of the Jiangling military debate, when Huanxi had differing opinions under Huan Wen's command, he coincidentally agreed with him, which also gave Yuan Xiao a sense of self-awareness. Huan Wen saw that both Yuan Xiao and Huanxi insisted on launching a surprise attack on Chengdu. Without any hesitation, he immediately pushed aside public opinion and left Sun Sheng, a member of the army, and Zhou Chu, the son of Zhou Fu, to guard the supplies in Pengma. He led the main force and only brought 3 days of food to attack Chengdu. Izhou, Chengdu. What are you talking about? The Jin army is approaching the capital. What do Li Fu, Zhang Jian and others do to eat? Why haven't they heard of any defeats? And when the Jin army passes through, perhaps the Jin people have wings and can fly over. Upon hearing the news, the ruler of the country, Li Shi, was extremely frightened and shouted loudly. The informant was extremely frightened and could only reveal the truth. The 2 generals attacked the Jin army but took the wrong path and are now in Jianwei. Li Shi was even more furious. During the Western Han Dynasty, Li Guang lost his way out of the frontier, which could also be attributed to his unfamiliarity with his hometown. However, in local warfare, Li Fu and Zhang Jian were also able to take the wrong path, which really made him angry and unable to calm down. The matter has come to this: fortunately, the three armies in Li Quan have been guarding important areas in the capital. Li Shi quickly sent someone to summon Li Quan and ordered him to intercept Huan Wen. After everyone retreated, Li Shi's anger was hard to dispel. However, a young girl walked into the side hall. She was not very old, only 14 years old, with a beautiful and charming appearance. She comforted him and said, "Father, there is no need to worry. The Jin army is small, and only generals Li Fu and Zhang Jian need to lead their troops to support them. They will surely turn bad luck into good." The girl is the daughter of Li Shi, Princess Li Yuan of Chengdu. Seeing his beloved daughter, Li Shi's restlessness subsided a lot and he sighed. "I just hope my uncle can intercept the Jin people for me." Li Quan is Li Fu's father and also Li Shi's uncle. However, the battle report quickly came from the front. Li Quan had been defeated in 3 battles and had already been breached by Huan Wen. The Jin army was as imposing as a rainbow and was heading towards Chengdu. Li Shi was even more frightened. He was supposed to hold on to the city and wait for reinforcements, but disaster never came alone, and bad news came from the front line. Li Fu learned that the Jin army was attacking Chengdu, so he returned to attack Pengmo. Pengmo was the logistics of the Jin army, and Li Fu's move was naturally to besiege Wei and save Zhao, but was repelled by Huan Wen's generals Sun Sheng and Zhou Chu. However, Zhang Jian did not wait for the Jin army in Jianwei and hastily returned to the army. Halfway through, he learned that Huan Wen had already arrived at the base of Chengdu, and Zhang Jian's troops were defeated without fighting. Now there is no hope for reinforcements, and the people in the city are anxious and unable to hold on. Li Shi followed the advice of his attendant Feng Fu and, taking advantage of Huan Wen's shortage of troops, concentrated the Chengdu troops and went out of the city to face the battle. The two armies fought a decisive battle at Suiqiao outside Chengdu. Huan Wen personally took command of the front line, while Huanxi rode horses and stood side by side with his father. The battle situation was fierce, and the sound of killing was deafening. Although the Jin army was elite, they had few soldiers after all. The Han army, with its overwhelming strength, once held an advantage. Report. Marshal, the battle ahead is unfavorable. Gong joined the army and died in battle. Gong Kanjun was also known as Gong Hu, a member of the Huan Wen shogunate. Huanxi had an impression of him as a tough middle-aged man. The general who followed Huan Wen's command saw the front line advancing towards his own side, and all of them were filled with fear. At this moment, a Han army arrow shot at Huan Wen's horse. The enemy's arrows were able to reach our commander, indicating the critical situation on the battlefield. At this moment, even Huan Wen had the intention to retreat. "Send me a command, beat the drums and retreat." As soon as he finished speaking, Huanxi beside him suddenly shouted, "No way. Nowadays, our army is short of food and soldiers, and we are advancing alone without retreating. Today's retreat will inevitably lead to a crushing army, and the battle against Shu will also be on the verge of defeat. Father Handsome. We can't afford to lose." Previously, the Han army suffered consecutive defeats, but today it is just a wave of fighting spirit. As long as they can resist their attacks, their troops will surely collapse. The brave win when meeting on a narrow road. Please ask your father to order the drum to be struck and boost the morale of the front soldiers. Upon hearing this, Huan Wen gritted his teeth and shouted loudly, "Enter the drum. Beat the drum." Huanxi didn't have time to be happy, so he quickly flipped over and dismounted. He was worried that the drummer would panic and make a mistake in his busy schedule. He turned the drum into a back drum and grabbed the drummer's hammer, exerting all his strength to beat the drum. Yuan Xiao, who was commanding the battle on the front line, heard the drumbeat and took advantage of the situation to motivate the soldiers to fight bravely. The Han army was unable to break through the formation of the Jin army, and indeed their morale weakened, leading to exhaustion. The Jin army was able to defeat the Han army outside the city. The drummer stared blankly at the reversal of the situation on the battlefield, and at this moment, the exhausted Huanxi handed over the drummer's hammer to the drummer. Originally, this great war should have been a mistake made by the drummers during their busy schedules, who turned the retreat drum into the advance drum, causing the Jin army to turn defeat into victory. Huanxi did not intend to steal the limelight of the drummer, but rather to save him. After all, this trend cannot last long. If the drummers are praised, who knows if there will be anyone who takes the initiative and does not follow Huan Wen's orders in the next war, and how Huan Wen will lead the army in the future. If entrusted to Huanxi for disposal, the drummers will inevitably be killed to clarify military laws, and at the same time, their families will be given generous rewards and punishments, which can be considered as clear rewards and punishments.